Okay, so good afternoon from me. It's what 1:30 in the afternoon here in the UK. One thing I've got to do every live stream now is do a bit of general housekeeping. Basically, if you want to leave comments, you've got to be subscribed for 20 minutes or longer. That makes life easier for my moderators. Basically, it keeps the idiots away. Basically, which is quite handy. So you have to be subscribed to leave a comment. Also try and keep things, tasteful and clean. Obviously, people will have differing views on a variety of topics, so there's that. But let's get going with it. So obviously, several big news stories have happened in sport. Obviously, last night Champions League, Man City win. It is always nice to see a first-time winner of a competition. However, with what's happening with Man City off the field and that ongoing investigation, of which news on that has gone very, very quiet, it'll be very, very interesting to see how things pan out with the Premier League investigation into Man City's financial uh, affairs and conduct pan out. Although obviously UEFA did find them guilty initially. Obviously, they had most of the punishment overturned, but they were found guilty. As I said, with the West Ham final against Fiorentina and then the final last night, not the best final I've seen. But we look at the dates that these finals are being played, like the FA Cup final, Champions League, Conference League, Europa League. They're happening very, very late in the year, and part of the reason for that is obviously the World Cup taking place over Christmas, basically just before Christmas. And another part of that is they're still trying to get up to date, basically after the COVID pandemic really disrupted the last couple of years. So fixture congestion really has been a thing. I wouldn't say it was the worst final. It was a very tactical, cagey first half, but you expect that from Italian teams who were trying to shut down a more expansive side. Um, I felt the last 20 minutes was very entertaining, very similar to the West Ham Fiorentina final. It took until the first goal was scored for the game to come to life. Similar with the FA Cup final as well, to a certain extent, with the penalty decision changing the flow of the game a little bit and opening it up. Was it the worst final? No, not in the slightest. There are worse finals that have been played. Um, I think the weather conditions had an impact as well, and yeah, as I say, the late date in the season. Why are we having major European um, and domestic cup finals in June? I mean, that is a question we need to ask, and UEFA and the domestic FAs need to be asked that question, and to a certain extent, FIFA. I'm talking about FIFA, the threat of a media blackout in the five major European TV markets due to TV rights negotiations, I think damages the women's game and damages the images of FIFA. That's still ongoing. We don't know if that has been resolved. They're running out of time to resolve that, so that will be interesting to see if that does get resolved, and obviously. We can watch the games and enjoy the women's game continue to grow, and hopefully England can have a good tournament to back up their Euros win. Obviously, the US are favourites, but England are one of the favourites, and it would be nice to see them make back-to-back finals and challenge the US. And obviously, key players are missing, players are injured, but again, they've played a lot of football as well and had very disrupted um, seasons. I think will they never be punished? I think there's a change in attitudes now. I think there is a change in attitudes, and I think they will be. How strong the punishment is something to be discussed, but it for too long there has been weak governance in the sport, weak governance in all sports. I mean, look at London Irish going out of business. That's three rugby union Premiership clubs going out of business, and two of them I think would have survived had it not been for COVID. Wasps, I think, their financial issues predate the pandemic, um, but it is a worrying turn of events that these warning signs were there before Worcester and Wasps entered administration. There were clubs saying that we're in trouble off the record, don't publish our names. And rugby union at club level is in a mess. Now, there's a lot of players who are now looking for basically new employers. Um, so we'll see what happens there. On the Man City side of things, I think we can theorise their punishments and how they get punished and will they, what happens. But we know they're guilty. UEFA found them guilty. There is no get out of jail free clause with a time limitation statute on the rule book in this case, because the FA and Premier League have slightly different rules in regards to these investigations and UEFA, so they can't go down that route. And they're whining foul about how the chief lawyer investigating was an Arsenal fan. I think, does it matter what? Does it matter that the lawyer in question is a fan of a rival club? Really? I mean, if that's your sticking point, saying you're not going to get a fair hearing, that shows how desperate the Man City board are. Haaland, yes. Could this have been a flash in the pan season? Possibly. His form in the last month has been a bit on the quiet side. And De Bruyne, obviously going off injured in the second Champions League final that he's played in, it's got to be a concern for City. His long-term fitness, he's had a lot of injury issues, and the fact that they're letting Gundogan go as well is quite interesting. But we'll see what happens. The objective was to win the Champions League. They've done that. But this is a club that also signed up for the European Super League because reasons. So congratulations on the recent milestones on YouTube. What's in store for the off-season transfer summer? I don't know what's in store really. We've obviously got State of Origin Game 2 and Game 3 in Australia in the Rugby League. We've got the Women's Football World Cup. We've got the Rugby Union World Cup coming up. We've got a lot of major sporting events on the horizon that are very, very important. So I don't know what's actually in store this summer really. I'll probably do some more sports history videos. I think I'll keep up to date with the transfer news, obviously. There's already been some transfers like McAllister, for example, going to Liverpool. And there is some player movement. But right now, I'm kind of glad the European football season is now over. So we'll see what happens. But I don't, at the moment, I have no real plans for this summer apart from I'm working a lot. Obviously, my strawberries are coming up quite well. My neighbour upstairs planted some strawberries. I'm helping him look after them. The strawberries are coming up quite well. So my gardening is and my mint's doing quite well. So there's that. Do I think Man City will get a harsh punishment? We've debated this before. We'll see what happens. We know they're going to get punished. If they give them a slap on the wrist, it's a bad look. If they don't punish them, it's a bad look. But this is a culmination of weak governance over a lengthy period of time from UEFA and the domestic FAs, because Man City are not the only club under the spotlight. They just happen to be, under the spotlight right now. We know of clubs like PSG. We know of AC Milan. There are other clubs in England as well that Everton could be the next club under the spotlight. So this is not just Man City. There's a vendetta against Man City. This is a much wider issue with sports governance, and we're seeing it in rugby union as well. If they give them a weak punishment, it's a bad look. If they give them, and it's the same with Barcelona, Real Madrid, and the European Super League and Juventus. Juventus got punished twice this season. They got one temporarily overturned before another punishment was put in place. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But there is now a growing movement to rein in the clubs. The clubs, a handful of the clubs tried to call UEFA's bluff and failed. And that is the European Super League. I think the pandemic sped up and forced their hand because the pandemic exposed their bad financial governance and their bad financial situations, and it forced their hand quite obviously. Had the pandemic not happened, I think the European Super League happens 5-10 years later. But I think the pandemic did, as I say, expose really poor governance as well, and it put UEFA on the back foot. But then UEFA reacted quite strongly to a point. They've met sort of some common. Same with the LIV golf. I think if the pandemic doesn't happen, that breakaway golf competition would have come in time. So what I need to do a video on this because I think no, I'm against that. Look, Super League clearly the reason why it comes about is not because it's for the fans, it's for the money, and it's basically to cover the losses that these clubs have made by some really outlandish spending. And again, the weak governance. I keep coming back to this. If there was strong governance, we do not have the clubs calling the tune to UEFA, trying to, which then over the last 30 years, UEFA have basically been weak. So when the clubs, stomp their feet a little bit, have a little tantrum, they alter the format of the Champions League, or they rebrand the UEFA Cup into the Europa League, or they drop the Cup Winners' Cup, or whatever it is. And there hasn't been people in governance who are actually good, um, you know, good, good governance. They've been very weak administrators. I think Alexander Serafin is a very good administrator. I think how they've restructured the Champions League, however, going forward, and bringing in the Conference League, which should basically be just the Cup Winners' Cup format as it was in 1999. I think they made a terrible mistake getting rid of that competition and the way they structured things. But that was because the clubs were calling the tune basically, and UEFA being the lapdog that it was like, so yeah. But the Super League doesn't have it. The fans have already said they're not going to support it. If you can't get your customer base on side, it ain't going to work. You can't get the mainstream established broadcasters on side, it ain't going to work. And if in those newer markets like the US, the fan base there were like, we don't want this, it's not going to work. So let that sink in. If oil money, Newcastle, Blackburn, would you support it? Well, we had Jack Walker, so we had the industrial money before. I think it's not oil money. I think it's got to be um, the right owner with the right intentions, because with these certain aspects, it's a political intention, and they're politicizing sport. So basically, these Middle Eastern countries are trying to cleanse their reputation for some of their bad human rights abuses and dodgy dealings and links to terrorism and corruption. And they're trying to put a human face to dictatorships. Um, so I don't particularly like the current owners, the Benkis, because they're completely incompetent. And there's links to organised crime with them. So let's just move on. But it's to put a human face to dictatorships. It's Saudi Yank money isn't clean. No, I wouldn't say all Yank money is dirty, but I don't think a lot of the US owners quite understand the European sporting culture and how we differ. They 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 really don't get how different um, our sporting systems are, and a lot of America. I mean, there are some really bad owners in the major leagues, some really bad major league owners. So that's any investment is good investment, I would suppose, in the basic terms. You want investment, you want infrastructure investments, want to have, you know, investment in the team, the facilities, and investment in the community. But not all American investment is good investment. There are a lot of downsides with that. The PGA merger with LIV Golf, talk about on 180 hypocrites claiming they've been more high ground. Look, there was pending litigation, and as I've said before, this has a lot of parallels with the WHA and the NHL in the 70s on the money side of things in regards to overspending, overcommitting, and player wages getting massively overinflated, which ultimately led to a change in player contracts. Salary down the line, there were player strikes and lockouts, and we have the system we have today in regards to player contracts, the relationship with the NHLPA. But the other real similarity is with the Super League Rugby League wars in Australia in the mid 90s because of the litigation. The litigation. But the similarities are there with previous attempted breakaway sports competitions in the same sport. The thing is, again, both sides of Saudi investment. So I have very little. Golf has shot itself in the foot, and golf is a sport that I've actually worked in. I've worked at a golf course. I've got friends who still work in the golf, the sport of golf. I've got friends who play golf and are actively involved in the sport, be it recreationally or for employment. So, in So I've seen the day-to-day running of a golf club, with the members and the non-members, and how a golf club operates, and the demographic of golfers. Um, and so what's happened here is I there is a lot of hypocrisy, but there was pending litigation. Now, US lawsuits, they get expensive. There was a lot of money being thrown around. Um, there was a lot of bad blood. But look, Greg Norman, as an ex-professional golfer, he's had his own issues with the PGA over a variety of things. There's some bad blood there. Um, Look, we'll see what happens. We'll see how the governance of the sport moves forward on a global level, because the DP Tour, which was PGA Europe, which is the sister tour to the PGA, has also been part of this merger. Um, the optics aren't great, because some high-profile players took a lot of cash short term to line their pockets to then basically pressurise Greg Norman and say, "Look, we want to go back to the PGA. We've made a quick buck." So there's a lot of greed there. There's not a lot of accountability. It does show that the PGA did have the reserve funds to pay, players for tournament positions more. Um, you know, Golf, much like tennis, much like snooker, you get paid where you finish. So if you finish lower down the leaderboard, you might barely make any money. Um, Very few outside the top 100 make a lot of money. So with all the glamour, like your Rory McIlroys and your Tiger Woods and your Phil Mickelsons and all that, a lot of golfers do struggle to make a decent living. Um, they are heavily reliant on personal sponsors. But golf did need a massive shake up anyway. Whether this whole episode benefits the sport long term or not, we should wait and see. But it's not a sport that really appeals to younger people at the moment. Much like baseball, there's a lot of sports where the fan base is an aging demographic, and you know that in itself is a problem. For the Miami Dolphins, anyone in Florida has links to the Narcos. Let's be honest here. Anyone worth any kind of any bit. It's Florida is a money laundering capital of the US. Um, golf does stand for gentlemen only ladies. There are still a handful of golf clubs that don't allow female members, and that's been brought up when tournaments like the Open or the PGA Masters or the PGA uh, title. Some of these rotating tournaments where things like the Open, they go to a location, or the Ryder Cup, and female members aren't allowed in the clubhouse, and that's sparked a slight political debate um, around the sport. The sport has problems. The sport does have problems. It does have an image issue. It is seen as a stereotypical, more upper class sport. So it does have an image problem where it's not accessible for more working class or people of lesser means, as fans or as players. Um, so and it is also seen as a predominantly white middle class sport, basically, and therefore not as open or accessible or to other demographics. Messi into Miami. There are a lot of rumours linking in with a move to the MLS. Whether it's fully confirmed or not is up in the air. Obviously, Benzema's gone to Saudi Arabia to join Cristiano Ronaldo in the Sports Wash League, as I call it. Saudi Arabia is the new Chinese Super League. Um, and look what happened to the Chinese Super League. It was match fixed to hell. Attendances were crap, rife with corruption, and a lot of those players and coaches ended up coming back to European and South American football. Um, I think a lot of professional sports are at a crossroads. A lot of them are high profile. There's a lot of high profile athletes, and it, 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 it we professional sport has to tread carefully, very very carefully. we'll see what happens with Messi and where he ends up. We'll see what happens, you know, uh, with the new the new golf PGA LIV. I mean, how's it going to look? What's it going to look like? What's the is it going to is it still going to be called the PGA? Is it going to be called World Golf Tour? I mean, how they're going to structure tournaments? How they're going to reconcile players and administrators and unify the sport. There's a lot of bad blood there. There's a lot of mistrust there, and the PR disaster it's been for both LIV and the PGA. Yeah, it's been a mess. The image damage, the reputational damage to the sport is quite profound. So we'll see what happens. Am I watching the NBA finals? No. Basketball, I will say that I don't hate any particular sport. There are some sports that I just do not find interesting. That's not to say that the athletes that compete in them and the fans don't deserve to enjoy what they watch. But the NBA is not a league, or and basketball's not a sport that I just can never get into it. So there's that. It's been a sad few weeks. A man's died. Well, look, one death at the TT is seen as a decent return. Last year there was 6. 2005 there was 11. Um, you know, the LIV PGA, as I say, the image that we're getting is it's pure greed, and this is what I think over the last 30 years, a lot of professional sports don't care where the money comes from as long as the money keeps coming in. Weak governance has been a problem. Um, so there's that. My thoughts on Kevin De Bruyne. Oh, I don't know. I mean, he never looks happy, Kevin De Bruyne. You never see him with a smile on his face, and he's had a lot of injury issues where he's now he's is he ever fully fit? Fantastic. He's got look. His passing game is fantastic. He can score goals from anywhere. You could put him in any team's midfield. He automatically makes the team better. But is he ever fully fit? I mean, that's the question. I mean, at the World Cup 6 months ago, he was a non-event. He was a passenger. So I don't know. Yeah, look, London Irish situation there. They were given an extra week. They couldn't get the deal over the line. But this is a much wider issue. Uh, with um, with rugby union, the Welsh game is in financial crisis. The English game is now in financial crisis. Major League Rugby, I did a video on it yesterday. They might be looking at this going with the new Miami team, the Miami Sharks coming in next year, and they want to keep growing the league. They might look at this and go, "There's going to be some players available who we can just offer contracts to as marquee players. Come over. There'll be some young, talented players who are out of a job, and there'll be some more senior pros who are winding down their careers who aren't ready to retire, who don't have a club to play for. I reckon Major League Rugby could hoover up some talent and fill out rosters with what's happening in the European game. Sport in general, as I say, is at a crossroads. For too long, sport has not cared where the money has come from. I think the COVID pandemic has exposed that, and sport is now making some really interesting decisions financially. Um, and I mean, do sports fans actually care? Or you know, I think we're at a crossroads socially as well. Um, I do. We'll see what happens. Would I have started Lukaku yesterday? I would have. Looking at it, I think Inzaghi had to go with a tactical setup, and it was working in the first half. Dzeko goes off injured, much like De Bruyne. He has to bring on Lukaku earlier than he wants. There's a reason why he's won some silverware with Inter and he's kept his job. Inter Milan, one of those clubs that goes through managers quite a lot. Since Rafa Benitez was there, he's the longest serving manager. He was trying to go for a cup double this year. They qualified for the Champions League next year as well. They finished third. Bit of a disappointing season, but in saying that, he's the longest tenured manager in a decade. So, and he's won the club silverware. So he's gotten to a European final, which they weren't expected to make. But so yeah, these Belgian players, this the Belgian side, and how disappointed they were at the World Cup. I don't, I don't know. I don't know with that one. Oh, well, my take on the Trump charges and the other political things, that's videos for the other channel. Famously, many years ago, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, similar live stream setup. We're doing a live stream, and someone brought up my views on what do I think of Donald Trump, and an hour and a half on a 5 hour live stream, I basically went into an expletive laden rant on the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, US politics, and Donald Trump. It was very hilarious. The following night, the person who had asked the question was in the live stream, and someone else asked the question, my views on Trump, and very quickly it was like, don't do it. Do my Trump voice. Man City, they're going to win. They won very well. They're going to keep winning. 1-0. They could have been 5. I can't. Man City is going to make soccer great again. They're going to keep making it great. They're going to keep winning. I'm not orange enough. Make Chelsea great again. Huge win. Huge win for Sheikh Mansour. Huge win. He's a lovely guy. I've seen some of the details of Benzema's move to Saudi Arabia. It's going to be it's ridiculous. Again, that's the Saudi sovereign wealth fund. Norway's, people go about these sovereign wealth funds, and some countries that do have a lot of are very resource rich, have done very well in saving up sovereign wealth funds. So if you live in Norway, there's a reason why Norway has one of the best education, healthcare systems, and pension systems in the world. Yes, their taxes are quite high, but the salaries are quite high. They have a sovereign wealth fund. Saudi Arabia, another resource-rich country, which doesn't have a lot of agriculture, doesn't have a lot of industry, apart from oil and gas, has basically put the money in the bank with interest, has a lot of gold reserves, stupidly wealthy, dictatorship, but stupidly wealthy, and so they can afford to just go, there you go. The problem is Saudi Arabia, much like China with the Super League all those years ago, you can just see the match fixing from here. I don't like Benzema. Karim Benzema, while he's a fantastic player off the field, he's a vile human being. That was proven in court. Um, he's got no morals. He's not a particularly likable character. Lukaku. Romelu Lukaku, he's so hit and miss. He's the Belgian version of Emil Heskey. Yeah, the Valbuena situation with Benzema. Look, that ultimately did impact the French national team at the time. It created a lot of headlines in the French press. Valbuena's career went down the toilet for no fault of his own. And people like Benzema profited from another player's misery. It's plain and simple. But that's not the first time in professional sports something like that's happened. But Karim Benzema doesn't come across as a particularly likable individual. And I will actually do a video on him. And the club of Marseille is just mired in controversy all the way back to the days of their Champions League winning. They're stripping of their French title because of corruption. So, oh, by the way, everyone knows about Lipton iced tea. I'm drinking Nestea, which is the Romanian Bulgarian version, the Eastern European version. It's bloody nice, and it's half the price. Of course, all the ingredients and everything is in Romanian and Bulgarian on the back. So I'm lucky that my neighbour is Romanian. Two of my neighbours are Romanian. But there's a lot of Bulgarian Cyrillic. I don't have an absolute clue what's going on. But yeah, rather nice. So there you go. When I unload on someone, it's funny. Some of my rants are hilarious. You know, Greg Norman. Growing up, he was one of my favourite golfers. But again, you know, he allowed a personal disagreement with the PGA administrators, you know, to turn into a vendetta against them to set up his own rival golf league for greed. And while some of the principles of altering how golf is played and tournaments and having team tournaments and those ideas are great, the way he went about it, yeah, you know, Nick Faldo, brilliant golfer, vile human being because he cheated on his wife with his caddy, and then I think he cheated on his caddy with someone else. So not necessarily outstanding, role models for society. Then we have some of the uh, characters in the NHL in the 80s and the 90s on all the drugs. So your Bob Proberts, your Grant Fewers, and others. Both of them got thrown under the bus. Others, nothing to see here. So, and I feel sorry for players like Bob Probert and Grant Fuhr. I mean, they were human beings, and Grant Fuhr still is a human being. And it is what it is. Is Haaland Ballon d'Or on the cards? Well, he's a bit of a one-trick pony. But the Ballon d'Or's a popularity contest now, not the actual best all-round player. Samir Nasri, I think, wasn't Samir Nasri involved in the Benzema situation? Oh, they're friends, and that Samir Nasri's another one. He's had issues. The French national France does ruin players. Is there a reason why I never use thumbnails? Time, and I just don't. I work a full-time job, and to be honest, I like doing it like this. It's simple, it's basic, less editing. I do my videos in one take. So when I start talking to when I finish talking, that's one take. It speeds up the process. I like keeping things basic because then I can just focus on discussing what I want to discuss. I have a very basic setup, as you can tell. My laptop is 5 years old now, 5.5 years old, so it's on its last legs. But it's a time saving exercise really. But I like keeping things basic. I like keeping things basic. It's easier for me, less stressful for me. I can just focus on. I might rearrange the apartment, get the whiteboard back out in time, and use the whiteboard again. Might use the headsets again. I've experimented with different lighting. I mean, I've got my lighting remote, so I can change the color of my light, so I can put it onto the strobe effect. We can put it back on white. We can put it on red, blue, yellow. I mean, I've experimented with that, but I like the lighting as it is. So I've experimented with various things, but yeah, thumbnails take time. And there's also that risk of a copyright violation. So when people go, oh, you should do this, you should do that, it's like, well, if I do start making money again, I'd rather not have to lose a load of revenue for copyright violations and copyright strikes because they can just take it away like that. And I've spent too long building a community and engaging with my viewers to risk that. I like keeping things simple. I've been told though I've got more of a voice for radio than the TV. Maybe the face doesn't fit. I don't know, but I've been told that I could do really good on radio, on a discussion show like something like Five Live, Sports Extra, or Talk Sport, or something like that, on a sports discussion show or a podcast, and I'll be happy to do that. I think you can. I think copyright, especially if it's a photograph, you can have a copyright violation for thumbnail. Unless you go for the ones from public usage, it can be tricky. But again, I've just got used to doing it this way. I like doing it this way. Um, I found that a lot of the channels that use excessive thumbnails and graphics and flashes and bangs and all this, they don't come across as genuine. Um, they don't come across as natural, and it's a comfort zone for me a little bit. if you'll notice when I first started doing content, if you go look at my early stuff, firstly it's shit. And so I'm unloading on myself now. Firstly, my early content's really shit. Um, and I've evolved how I do things. I'm more confident in talking now. When I first started, my confidence was at zero. I was very more reactionary rather than unbiased. I I've learned to go. You know what? I may not particularly like that football club, but I'm going to talk about, let's say, Millwall, for example, or whatever, in a non, in a more. Oh, here's the history of the club. A lot of channels I come across are clickbait most of the time. I watched this one guy who said he was going to rank all the stadiums in the championship. Yeah, I think I've come across that one. There's a guy who's come across literally on my recommended list. Not interested. Um, I look. I mean, I try and keep. I try and keep things simple and not overly complicate things with too many stats. Too many figures. I try and go okay because in layman's terms, if you were to ask me about player contracts, I'd be like, well, how transparent are they really? I mean, they don't have to disclose their salaries because it's not law in this country that you have to disclose your salary. Uh, you know, so there's that. Before, cricket wow factor isn't there any more scheduling favours? Well, that's the ICC. Those three cricketing boards, the ECB, the BCCI, Cricket Australia, dominate the ICC. So the TV money, the revenues generated, most goes to there. Then followed by New Zealand to Africa. I watched a documentary on how the ICC's structured, and it's nepotism at its finest. Straight off the bat, he goes, "I can't rank Argyle because I haven't been there." Then what's the? It's yeah. So he just comes across as an absolute div, then, doesn't he? Do I think English and Welsh should get together to start a new rugby premiership? Look, Welsh Rugby Union and English Rugby Union are in a mess. Combining two large messes together to make a humongous mess is just not the way to do it. And both unions would not want to work with each other. You would have to have, and then you risk the United Rugby Championship with the stability that's starting to come there. The South African teams joining have created, improved the quality. The Italians have improved. The Irish are the glue that holds it together, and the Scottish sides are there. And part of it disrupting that newly found stability would be a concern, and the other unions would have to go, okay, would have to come to some kind of agreement going, well, if the Welsh game, do you want to stay, do you want to leave? There'd be a lot of, but I wouldn't trust the Welsh union or the RFU to do the right thing anyway. Bring back the VB Cup Tri Series in Oz. You could do, but then think of the TV, trying to domestic markets, the TV as well. What's up with Man United and want to sign all the English players? Reports saying this morning you want to sign Pickford to replace De Gea. Well, De Gea, they need to replace De Gea. Man United, much like Chelsea over the last 5-6 years, have been linked with almost every single player. Doesn't matter if they're English or overseas. Man United and Chelsea for a very long time. As soon as a player is unsettled or is available or there's negotiations or scouting, they're linked with him. So don't buy too much into that. That's just again clickbait, mainstream media, and online speculation, which is why I don't do rumours. I do facts. That Scouser does not. I don't do ifs, buts, maybes. I do facts. That was quite a funny one. I do absolutes. I don't do rumor videos. I do. This has happened. This player's been transferred. This is the transfer fee. Or this manager's been sacked. This manager's been hired. You know that kind of thing. The Indian cricket team seems to struggle in the business end of the tournaments for some reason. Not always, but again, they play a lot of cricket now. The Indian players, they don't really get a lot of time off. Same with the Aussies. Same with the top quality West Indians, Kiwis, South Africans, English, because of the IPL, because of the Big Bash. There's not a lot of time off for these players, so there's burnout. Bring back the Rugby League Ashes. Yes, I think there's an argument for that, but International Rugby League is a mess. Look at what's happened with the French World Cup, the French pulling out, and now we don't know who's going to be hosting the next Rugby League World Cup. The international that basically the international game basically needs the NRL basically to be the driving force. Um, and The international game is a shambles. There doesn't seem to be a willingness to fix it. There's a reason why rugby union has won the hearts and minds of the wider sporting fan base globally, the broadcasters globally, and at the international level at least sells the game better, sells their product better. Um, Rugby union has problems, but on the international stage, they sell themselves and are better organised. Whereas rugby league is just, just doesn't cut it. And Angelos Postecoglou, he's gonna it's gonna be look. He has the right philosophy. He sets up his teams to play in a certain way. Did it, with the national side with Australia. He's done it with Celtic. You can debate about the quality of opposition, but he's had a good spell at Celtic. Tottenham, there needs to be a massive squad overhaul. Whether he's going to be given, I mean, look, Conte wanted to change things, Mourinho wanted to change things. There's a sticking point there. It's called Daniel Levy. As long as Daniel Levy is chairman, Spurs are going nowhere. They do need to radically overhaul the playing squad. And then, look, as I said, I don't do rumours and I don't do videos based on rumours, but strong reports linking Harry Kane as a replacement at Real Madrid for Karim Benzema. So if Harry Kane is to leave Spurs, it means that squad rebuild is going to have to happen now. If he can keep Harry Kane for a year or two, they can delay an aspect of the rebuild, but they do need a squad overhaul. I think it's going to be tough. I think he's going to try and play in the right way, but remember this: he wasn't their first choice either, and so they never get their first choice manager. Managers who are available don't want to go there. Um, Without trophies, Spurs have pushed. Yeah, but they haven't won anything. So for 15 years, in 2008 they had that opportunity in 2008 to take that next step after winning the League Cup. They didn't. Okay, they got to a couple of finals. Yay, they didn't. But they didn't take that next step. I think rugby union in England needs a complete overhaul. 3 top flight going under in space here. That's not a good look. Imagine if this was Premier League. You just stated it. It's not a good look. The governance of the game is a shambles. The RFU has washed its hand because they said Premiership you can govern yourself. And But the ring fencing was a bad idea. Saracens were let back in after a year. They've won again. Leicester were allowed to keep breaching the salary cap, so they're protected. And you know, 2 of the clubs that went out of business were very, very successful on the field. Worcester not so much, but I think even Worcester won silverware. The whole thing is an absolute mess. So uh, I it sounds like you have no hope for professional club rugby union. Well, in the UK, it is a shambles. I'm not going to lie. Professional rugby union in the UK is an absolute mess. But professional rugby union, other than the French and to a certain extent Major League Rugby, is a shambles. They've got things wrong. I don't know what the solution is, but I do think you know the wage structure is wrong. They need to look at why clubs are getting into this situation with massive debts. Um, but it's just a mess. They were bringing back the Ashes. It's funny seeing the West Ham fans saying we've got 1 more trophies than Spurs. Well, they've won European trophies. They've won, European final. Spurs choked it. So in that regard, and they actually have 1 more European trophies than Spurs. There would be action if it was a Premier League club, but we actually to say that Portsmouth basically went to the wall and there wasn't action. Leeds were going tits up before they were relegated. The first time round, there was no action until afterwards. So, but it would be interesting if, let's say, a big club did go belly up, or several big clubs, but it would send shockwaves. But this look what's happened to Real Madrid and Barcelona. No action's been taken. They still got massive debts. If that was a lesser club, no, they've gone. So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But again, weak governance is where we are. Um, Spurs, Harry Redknapp. Why was he fired from it? Well, Harry Redknapp and his dog's bank account and his time at Portsmouth with Milan. Harry Redknapp is a bit similar to Big Sam Allardyce. There's been allegations about Harry Redknapp and some of his dodgy dealings, uh, and he was involved in a court case in regards to the collapse of Portsmouth that was also linked to issues at Sheffield Wednesday with Milan Mandrich. He seems a bit of a wheeler dealer, but again, he hasn't been proven in court. But there's some suspicions, much like Sam Allardyce, there's some um, dodgy goings on there. Yeah, look, West Ham winning a European trophy, it's a fantastic achievement. But now that you know, some of those players are going to leave, um, yeah, I mean, look, you say top rugby players are overpaid, but I think what needs to be, I think the wage structures are wrong, and I keep going back to this. Augustine Pichot said we need to balance out the money in rugby union when he was standing against Bill Beaumont, and Bill Beaumont wins that election in 2019, and then Pichot just gave up with World Rugby with the direction the game was heading because, well, in part because of COVID, and he's decided to go. I'm done with sports administration. I'm putting forward concerns. They're not being acted upon. Let it burn. Um, I wouldn't say they're overpaid, all of them, but I think wage structures. We need to look at how you know spending income over expenditure is. There's the checks and balances aren't there. We need more transparency in the system. My thoughts on Sale Sharks. I mean, look, three clubs have gone out, but Sale Sharks, they're a good side. To be honest, they are a good side. Um, they've always had some good players, and that is in rugby league country, and they've got to compete against the Premier League, Rugby League, Super League, and they do reasonably well up north. They will never punish the money teams in Spain and England. I think that mindset has to change because football as we know it will be dead completely, and it's going down the toilet as we sit here and do nothing, as the governance has been weak for so long. Barcelona will pull a lever again. Messi shirt sales alone would save them in La Liga. Um, will it though? Like they can't afford to pay his wages and his signing fee, so they no. They signed Neymar to be Messi's replacement, then they sold Neymar before Messi left. They've made some very interesting decisions, and you've got to ask the question: where's all the money gone? Where's all the money gone? What's my thoughts on the PG? I've discussed that. It's a mess. How is the sport going to unify itself? The sport still has these massive issues with the perception of it. Do I like P-Shot because he gave up? I like P-Shot because of what he stands for. Not that he gave up. I think his frustrations were very, very clear with the blinkers within the organisation. He gave up on world rugby. He didn't give up on rugby itself. He's a passionate rugby man. Um, and as a sports administrator, he's very, very good. But when he was raising the concerns um, that World Rugby, the finances were overheating, that the business model was broken and needed adjusting, they haven't acted upon it. And fast forward a couple of years, what he was predicting has happened. So I don't. I would rather Augustine Pichot was running the game than Bill Beaumont at the global level. He's younger. He's more in touch with the modern game. He'd only recently, not long, retired from the professional game. He'd been an amateur going to professional, where Bill Bowman was only an amateur player. He ruffled the feathers of the old boys, which is what I liked. And he spoke with a lot of reason and a lot of sense. Um, a lot of sense. And unfortunately, the old guard wins out yet again, and the sport is in crisis at a professional club level, international level. The game is fine. Some of the rule changes again are very reactionary. World Rugby and the various unions are afraid of getting sued and the litigation. And I think they've got a lot of their rule changes wrong, massively wrong. Um, and there's a risk of an exodus of players from the game. So the current governance is being reactionary to concussion and other injuries, player welfare, because they weren't proactive for the previous 25, 30 years. They failed the players in the past, so now they're overreacting in the present, damaging the future. And again, P-Shot was saying, we need to get this right. We need to enforce the rules of the game as they're written down, not keep tinkering with them. And he was right there. Messi will fit in well in Miami. There's a massive Hispanic population. He resonates with a lot of people. I think people criticise players for going to the MLS, but the MLS isn't a bad quality league. And Beckham and Ibrahimovic came back and played in Europe after their spells in the MLS and did rather well coming back to Europe after their spells in the MLS and continued to perform. And it actually extended their careers because they were keeping fit as well as playing. Um, yeah, Wembo and Lee Hang. Yeah, look, I've been discussing match fixing in snooker for a while. This isn't a new thing. I've tuned out of snooker because of the corruption that is endemic in the sport. And it troubles me that I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think there's a much bigger problem. The fact that most of the players actually went, yeah, you caught us, and didn't even try and deny the fact that they were doing it, shows the situation for what it is. But some of these allegations go back years. This isn't just happened in the last few months. This is an ongoing situation in regards to world snooker. So this didn't happen overnight. This has been an ongoing thing. There were players back in when the channel's infancy in 2017, 2018. There were players under the spotlight, and Higgins and Maguire are two high profile British players where there's that suspicion of. And John Higgins, his reputation's gone. And he gets very, very short with people when it's brought up, going, well, hey, you admitted to taking bribes. You should have been banned, mate. I wouldn't say it's in the most right. Australia it's in a bit of a mess. Even South Africa's got problems. New Zealand's got problems, and obviously at the moment it's in the spotlight in the Northern Hemisphere because the struggles of the Welsh game, three high-profile English clubs going belly up, the situation financially. But Australia's got issues as well and has had issues for a long time. South Africa, the Super Rugby collapse and the South African sides joining the Pro League, which is now the United Rugby Championship. You're just rebranding a competition that's got financial issues in certain locations. Wales. I think COVID has accelerated some of the issues and exposed some of the problems. And the scary thing is, Augustine P-Shot, 3.5 years ago, has been proven right now. And they didn't want to listen to him. I agree with his principles and what he stands for. I wouldn't say everything he was proposing was the right way to go, but I think World Rugby made a terrible mistake re-electing Bill Beaumont because it's the old boys club in the governance of the game, and the game is in crisis. I do think I wouldn't say football in England and Wales is thriving everywhere. That is not the case. The media does paint a much a false picture of the situation. Um, there is a lot of money issues within the game. I wouldn't say it's thriving. I think that's a false narrative that the mainstream media is putting out because we've had two European successes in a week, with two out of the three finals being won by English clubs. Um, you know, the Wrexham story, while it's fantastic, before they come along, Reynolds and McElhenney, the club's on its knees. Um, Macclesfield have gone out of business, Bury's gone out of business, Southend are facing extinction. It's not as rosy, and then there's other clubs in the football league that are is going to try to blow their brains out basically because they've got no money. I wouldn't say the MLS is on League One level. I think it's entertaining. I think it's a fun league to watch. I don't like to go, oh, this league's not worth watching because it's of a lesser quality. Not at all. I think the way especially in Europe, the UEFA coefficient and the restructuring of the European competitions has actually damaged a lot of leagues. Like I was looking at doing some club histories and some clubs in Sweden and Switzerland and Central and Eastern Europe, and you look at it, and in the early '90s, um, Swedish clubs. I think Swedish clubs have been in the old European Cup final more than once. Malmo did it. Um, uh, Gothenburg have been to a European final. Now you wouldn't see a Swedish club in a Champions League final. You wouldn't see, a Belgian club go on a run to a European final. You wouldn't see well, okay, Ajax and Feyenoord and PSV have been to European finals in my lifetime, but it's not as regular as it used to be. Um, so the UEFA coefficient's done European leagues harm, and part of that's the TV deals as well. And then you look at the MLS. I think the MLS is in a much stronger place than what it was a decade or so ago. I think the Beckham effect then led to other players you know, of his generation, with the younger end of his batch of players going over, and Ibrahimovic obviously gave a secondary boost to the league. Um, but look, when it comes to club football on a regular season, I'm not interested. I'm interested in cup football and international football because that's where you get the great stories of these, cup runs and underdog stories like Morocco at the last World Cup or Greece at 2004 Euros. Yeah, look, P-Shot leaving World Rugby. Yeah, the two USA and Canada have failed to qualify. The United Rugby Championship, America's thing, COVID partly did that as well. That being discontinued is a problem. But Major League Rugby is in its infancy and is establishing itself. But discontinuing the American Rugby Championship was a massive blunder. But COVID has had an impact on that as well. The pandemic did have an impact on that competition. But again, it's World Rugby. P-Shot, was trying to grow the game in new locations and in lesser locations, trying to raise the profile. And we look at it now, and Chile and Uruguay are at the World Cup. The US and Canada aren't. So that is interesting. But look, I mean, he put his heart and soul into his part of World Rugby. He feels let down. You can understand his frustration at the direction the sport's taken. On Monday, the FA confirmed that Bury FC could be used in competition for the first time. Look, the situation around what happened at Bury and their collapse and rebirth as a Phoenix club, it is fantastic. It was also a worrying thing at the same time. I am surprised more clubs haven't gone the same way as Bury since 2020. I'm actually stunned by how few clubs have actually struggled. Well, actually, when I say struggled, actually hit the wall. But it is what it is. How impressive do I find the Man City treble? Well, with the off-field allegations continuing and the off-field investigation, it tempers it. But on the field, the comparisons will be made to the '99 Manchester United side. The comparisons will be made if they fail to repeat the Champions League and retain the Champions League next year. If they can do that, the comparisons were made with the Nottingham Forest side of the late 70s, early 80s. If they can win multiple Champions Leagues, the comparisons were made with Liverpool. Um, they've won 3 league titles in a row. So there's that comparison with the historical Arsenal and Huddersfield sides already, and that is but it's different eras. The game was played differently in the 90s. The game was different in the 80s. The game was different in the 30s and the 20s. The sport has changed. I think would that Man City side now beat some of the top sides of the 90s and early 2000s? Probably not. I actually think um, that football was at a higher quality 20 years ago. My personal opinion. But yeah, comparisons will be made. Um, only financial fair play can stop City. Yes and no. I mean, their worst enemy is themselves, be it on or off the field. Frank Warren, Eddie Hearn, are they both dodgy? Matthew Links, who's the other better man? Neither. Um, so that's my view on Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn. And boxing and sport promotion has been heavily linked with organised crime, dirty money for a long time. And any you know, that's my view on it. Um, Eddie Hearn comes across as a modern day Del Boy. Well, you know he's dodgy, but you can't prove it. So, but the perception's there. The lingering stink of you know you know sleaze is there. And bearing in mind, Eddie Hearn and his dad Barry were involved with World Snooker, and look at all the corruption that's now attached to the sport, and they still have shares in it. So just let that sink in. Walker dropped and Kevin De Bruyne out. I was worried for my. I actually think, depending on you know what Guardiola does, he has stated though if they are found guilty of any of the charges, he walks. So it'd be very interesting if he sticks to his word in that regard. But he did state he wanted to win the Champions League with Man City. He's done that. He's achieved that. Um, the one thing about English football is how competitive historically it is with different league titles and cup winners that we've had, both domestically and in Europe. It would become troubling if suddenly the domestic game becomes really uncompetitive. Um, we started to see that in the 90s with Man United. We saw it to a certain extent in the 80s and 70s with Liverpool, to a certain extent, but there were other league winners and cup winners and European trophy winners from the UK. If we get to a point where it's them all the time, you know, we'll see. But um, obviously, this title win is tempered with the off-field allegations against the club, and but the sporting landscape has changed, especially in football and some other sports. You know, um, it has changed. The debate has changed. The money's changed, not necessarily for the better. And the greed, especially in football, is ridiculous. It's a very, it's as I've always stated, football doesn't care where the money comes from. There's a reason why they went to Qatar. There's a reason why, um, these Middle Eastern investors are pumping money in. Um, there's a reason why the North Americans are pumping money in. Um, football doesn't care where the money comes from. Um, I've gone off boxing a long time ago. It has become a complete and utter circus, and the allegations surrounding boxing with corruption and sleaze are there. So it is what it is. If they are found guilty, I mean, look, Juventus were done for match fixing. They've also been done for some financial dealings. They've had points deductions. They've had title strip. Barcelona and Real Madrid. If La Liga and UEFA had some bollocks, which they don't, they would be, exiled from La Liga. But they're not allowed. They're not told to get their finances in order. Um, Does the Man City treble have the same feel as the '99 Man United treble? Yeah, no. Then again, I am 24 years older. I've watched a lot of sport in that time, a lot of football in that time. Um, it doesn't have the same feel. Um, it doesn't. So there's that. Well, it doesn't. It, it's a difficult one, but it just doesn't. Um, I think the Nottingham Forest historically and Arsenal's Invincibles and the United treble, they seem to have more cultural significance as well. Um, so that's my view on it. In America, there are many vacated championships. Means nothing after the fact. But yeah, I suppose it's true. I suppose. Will the new financial fair play or the new spending rules be enforced toughly, or be a toothless tiger? From the looks of it, and from what certain clubs are currently doing with not re-signing like Barcelona and PSG, like just letting players go for nothing, I think it's going to be a really really enforced a lot stronger. I think UEFA have stood up to the Super League debacle, and PSG, Messi's exit, and the hints that they've got to cut their wage bill. Um, so, it, but look, as I say, um, I think from the murmurings within that, I think clubs are trying to sign these players now. Get they'll probably argue for grandfathered contracts, as it's known, contracts that were signed before. I think players are trying to cash in now. Hence why players like Benzema and Ronaldo have gone to Saudi rather than stay in Europe for another season or two. Got a bloody insect bite on my leg. Um, Players are obviously cashing in while they can because they know they're not going to be able to get paid as much. We may see some ridiculous transfers this year before the new spending rules come in next year. So it's going to be an interesting one. You think a quad needs to be done? Well, there was talk about Liverpool doing a quadruple last year. I mean, if Liverpool had actually pulled that off, winning 4 trophies last year. In the end, they won 2, and that went down to the wire as well. That went down to the last couple of weeks of the season with Liverpool. So Man City, I mean, Liverpool got close last year. They ended up with 2 trophies, and I think yeah, Man United did have more like local youth talent in their setup, or players that had come through their youth system. And yeah, Phil Foden was the only player involved in Manchester City last night that has come through their youth academy. So you can have that debate going, well, Man United actually built a lot of their success around the class of '92, and then continued success with other players coming through their youth system to supplement the class of '92. I think you can agree. I think I can agree with that. When United were struggling, they decided to look at their youth system for improvement long term, and it worked for them. Um, but there is that argument. A proper quadruple would be Champions League, Premier League, FA, and League Cup. I wouldn't go for the Club World Cup or anything like that. But hey, we'll see what Pep decides to do. Um, Matters not. It's all about money now. Not many local players in top team. You could look at like Brighton with Dunk, who's a local lad, um, being one of the few, who's signed with their local club, stuck with them. Um, yeah, the Community Shield is classed as silverware. Yes, it goes in the trophy cabinet. Matters not. It's all about money now. Not enough local players and teams. I think, yeah, I do think we need to look at across Europe homegrown talent quotas, and trying to keep, you know, and grow playing squads organically a little bit. I think that's going to occur as well. I think we're going to see less mega bucks transfers in years to come. I think right now, I think we're going to see clubs spend while they can, and then with the new financial spending rules, I think that's going to drastically change, and we may see a power shift. Brazil's next manager, who will it be? Will Pep or someone different? Well, Guardiola has stated he wouldn't mind trying his hand at international management. I think that will be very, very interesting if he decides to go down that route. International management is different from club management. Ancelotti. Ancelotti. I think Ancelotti has done international management before, and again, there's that discussion about Southgate's successor and who do they get in to replace Southgate when his contract's up if he decides to stay post next year's Euros, and that's going to be a debate. About who replaces Gareth Southgate. Do we go for an English manager like Eddie Howe, or do we look at the overseas manager market again? Um, yeah, Pep's never had to go to a club that's working on a small budget or a rebuild, so there will be that debate. Well, go to a club that hasn't won for a very long time and actually get the academy players in and go for a rebuild. I'm black, but I don't love the fact that England and France national team don't play. Right, I'm trying to work this question out. Um, I'm black, but I don't love the fact that England and France national teams don't play uh, yeets. Spain and Italy don't do that, or Croatia, etc. That question makes no sense. Oh, foreign-born nationals. Um, it's an interesting one. Technically, England do have some foreign-born nationals in their side historically, and as do France. There's a lot of England players who are eligible for other countries. Same with France. It's an interesting one. The residency rule and selection rules. We need to look at that. That always comes up. Yeah, politics and sport, especially over the last 3-4 years, has become so blurred now. So blurred. It's. I try. I enjoy watching sport because it's an escape from the everyday. Right. I get invested in watching whatever sport it is because all the crap gets left at the door for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, however long the sporting event lasts for. Um, Unfortunately, the political side of things has wormed its way in, and yeah, that's the thing. As someone from Detroit, I want my local team to be local youth or use locals. That's a problem with the US franchise-based system is you rely on drafts. And so while you might get a running back in the NFL who was born and raised in Detroit or in Michigan or goes to Michigan State, and that'd be fantastic. You rely on a draft system where the general manager of your team will go, let's get the best available player for that role. Um, um, so, and then it's interesting that we've got a US perspective here because a question I want to ask, and I have done a video on this, is how do North American fans, predominantly American fans, but also some Canadians, feel about the major leagues taking games overseas? That's a question I want to ask North Americans. I did a video on it, and one North American guy's like, "I'm a sports fan, I don't care," which I don't think is the general viewpoint. I think it's a very mixed reaction to when the NFL goes to London, or the Major League Baseball comes to London, or the NBA goes to Paris, or the NHL goes across Europe, and we'll be going to Australia. It would be very, very interesting to see um, and hear and get the feedback from North American fans about when the major leagues take games over. Uh, See, that's an interesting one, as long as it's not your team or the playoffs. So that's every single fan base in every single league then going, as long as it's not my team or if it's not a playoff game. I think it's that sense of selfishness a little bit going, as long as it's not my team, as long as I'm not missing out with my season ticket because I've lost two or three, games per season. That is very, very interesting. It's the it's someone else's problem. As long as it's not my team, you I find that very interesting. Very, very interesting. Um, Sterling could play. Yes, Sterling could play for Jamaica. And there are some players that have been involved uh, with the England setup or the Ireland setup who've swapped nations as well. Wilfred Zaha is a prime example. Yeah, game 39 for the Premier League. After seeing the European Super League debacle, I think the Premier League would want to shelve that idea forever. Um, And a lot of the US fans who follow the Premier League or the European leagues actually don't want to see us take games over their regular season. They don't want it. They invest. The North American fans, from what I can gather, invest in our leagues and our teams as viewers because of the tradition aspect, because of the link with community aspect, because of the history of our sports. And it's not just English football. They could watch rugby league or rugby union and go, okay, this team is involved with the community, has been for a long time. It has the community base, the youth system, you know, the links with the community, a lot of local talent coming through that has been come through their academies and all that. And it's something that you don't get in North America. But yeah, game 39, phew, that went down well. But yeah, the Premier League at one point, it's always lit up when the Glazers came along and when Abramovich came along because money and money. Um, as well as on US Sport Conference realignment and TV drives, rivalries, it ain't no more like us Trojans leaving Pac-12. The NFL is for money, not Americans. I see footy differently. Forest Green is traditional. Got Forest Green Rovers with their owner. He wants to move them outside the village of Nailsworth up the road and build a brand new stadium. They can't even build their own current stadium. It's more homegrown and soulful. Um, that's an interesting one. If the English football wants more games, go back to 42, which means expanding the top flight. Um, there's a reason why the Premier League came into existence. Money. Money and money. Forest Green project is coming to an end soon. Look, they got relegated. They did one season in League One, were utterly demolished. Be kind. Even Big Doug Ferguson couldn't save them. Think about it. Look at all the English players getting ignored by the current and previous England managers. It's easy to play for another national team with less competition. I think Gareth Southgate has definitely got a lot of his selections question marks over them. The results speak for themselves that the team, tournament wise, is doing better than what it was when he took over. We can all agree on that. A semi final, a final, and a quarter final. Okay, the last World Cup. Ironically, we were playing better in the last World Cup than we played in the previous one, but that's another thing. But yeah, overlooking, Abraham and Tamori and some other young players who are clearly playing well in top flight leagues outside of England or just playing well, um, does raise some eyebrows. Without Ward Prowse, Southampton would have been relegated a month earlier than what they were. So we'll see on that one. In my life of 30 years, Detroit Tigers have had two stadiums. This is true. Soccer teams have 100-year-old grounds and local pubs. True, but Brentford obviously moved from Griffin Park, and that had a pub on each corner of the ground. Southampton moved from St Mary's, moved from the Delta to St Mary's. Filbert Street was Leicester's ground. They've now got the KC Power, or the King Power, should I say. Arsenal moved from Highbury to the Emirates. Spurs just rebuilt their stadium because Levy. and NFL and money and money and money and not winning anything but money. Just money. Make it rain. Money is something I don't have, so I can say this with a hint of sarcasm. But a lot of clubs have gone. We basically after Hillsborough in the UK, basically the law was changed in regards to all-seater stadiums, and we now have these safe standing areas where there's also a seat, but there's a rail where you can stand up, but you can still sit down. So it's not a true terrace. There were safety issues, and they tried to get rid of the hooligan element, which is what the North Americans don't quite understand how violent European and South American football. I'm going to call them hooligans and ultras. How violent we can be. I think the US is in for a shock in 3 years' time, a massive shock when the European South American fan bases descend en masse. Um, they are going to be stunned. You can see the USA not winning the Women's World Cup. Well, Japan beat them once, and the Germans and the Norwegians have got great success historically with the women's game. The Canadians could do it. The Canadian team um, have a very good setup, but they've had their issues with their federation as well. Both the US and Canadian women's teams have had issues over payments and sponsorships, and basically going on strike over the years. So, but the US, I don't think they're as dominant as like look at the Germans, how poor they were. So, Bolton moved to Brandon Park to the Reebok. True. Do I prefer the older stadiums? To a certain extent, it depends. Like stadiums like Kenilworth Road and Fratton Park, you actually have to walk through. Fratton Park, the away end, I think it's the home end. I can't remember. One of the stands, you walk through like an old Tudor house, but it isn't. It's part of the stadium, but it's basically the stadium offices you walk through. Kenilworth Road, you walk through the old street terrace, the old Victorian factory housing, and a couple of the entrances into the away end. You basically go through someone's front living room that's been knocked through, and they made an archway, and you go through. Um, those are those kind of like unique things. Griffin Park used to have a pub on each corner. QPR's got a pub on each corner. Craven Cottage has got the cottage, which used to be a pub in the corner, which is now a listed building, so they can't knock it down. Some of the older stadiums, I've been to the old Griffin Park, I've been to Fratton Park, I've been to the Vicarage Road when the old terrace was still standing but was disused. I've been to some of these older stadiums that have had refurbs and still have that bit of character. Um, um, so I don't know. Some of the modern stadiums are fantastic facilities though, and still catch that atmosphere and get it right. Some of the other modern stadiums are very very soulless, so it's a bit hit and miss. The Bradford City fire. Yeah, that was a dark day. That was the same year as Hazel, I believe. Hazel got nothing on Eastern Europe, Middle Eastern soccer violence. Just Europe in general. The Hazel disaster. There were warnings. Same with Hillsborough. Well before those two matches were played in the 80s. Warnings that these stadiums aren't. There's issues here from previous seasons. And previous matches. Like this is going to happen, and it happened. So let that sink in. At least Detroit sports fans have had it better than Cleveland. This is also true. Barely better than Cleveland, but yes, thank God. Well, the Red Wings have saved Detroit's blushes over the years. Can we give Rupert Murdoch a pat on the back for the success of the Premier League, or blame him for the greed Sky TV? Both. He almost destroyed rugby league in Australia as well, so both. There's dozens of pubs inside Parliament. For Pete's sake, I love booze. I don't drink anymore, and I used to drink a lot. I used to be a barman. I used to be a waiter. I've drunk a lot over my time. I don't drink anymore. But on that side, if you want to come over and experience the, the sporting culture, what a lot of North American sports fans don't realise, rugby union and cricket, there's no segregation of fans. You don't have the home and away, you can mingle. Rugby league and football and ice hockey, you want to say you're an away fan or a home fan when you're buying a ticket, because that's going to end really, really badly for you. I've seen this before where American fans have turned up and you're queuing to get in, and the ticket seller goes home or away, and they're like, "I'm here to watch the game. Home or away? What? what team are you? And they yeah, um, and yeah, they're in for a very rude awakening when they see the heightened police presence, the heightened security presence, and then there's the banter, and then there's the you know rather nasty stuff as well that gets said and done. Um, North American fans really are in for a general culture shock, not just those that have actually followed and understand and understand the history and all that, but those casuals who, again, when the World Cup's on, they're in for a very, very rude awakening. Especially when they watch their first game and they don't have absolutely, they are in for a rude awakening. Um, Trump buying Aberdeen or any truth to it? Or, no, he's indicted on federal charges for Christ's sake. And I'm not sure Aberdeen Football Club would want him to be their owner, with all the controversy and negativity that goes with that. I can't see that happening. I could see investment in Scottish football from American owners because of the cultural links on the eastern seaboard with a large population of Scottish ancestry. I can see that, and I can see that being a way um, for Scottish football to have a rebirth. Back in the day, I think obviously he owned some golf courses in that part of Scotland and has investments on property over there. Um, that would have been interesting. It would have been interesting, um, absolutely. Uh, but again, this is there's there I don't do in rumours. I do in facts and statements and absolute rumours. Clickbait. I hate clickbait. Um, Rangers don't exist. It's Sevco FC. Well, they're a Phoenix club, much like Bury FC or a Phoenix club right now. Um, the current ownership basically bought the rights, and the club reformed. Um, you know, Scottish football is dead. Not going to change. Celtic have done 5 domestic trebles in 7 years. That's ridiculous. Um, Aberdeen. We're going to make Aberdeen great again. We're going to win. We're going to win well. We're going to build a wall around Glasgow. No, I can't do a Trump voice with Aberdeen. Aberdeen, pal. Oh, you pal. Granite City. Um, I mean, we're gonna make the dance great again. We're gonna make them so great. We're gonna win. We're gonna get so tired of winning. VAR is a joke. The AI needs Specsavers or its Labyrinths and the rest of it. Um, it. I think VAR. I think with the interpretation of the rules and a lack of consistency is the problem. They football, soccer for you, but football association football is so far behind other major sports in regards to implementation of technology and video refs to assist the on field or on court or on ice officials. Yeah, it's got the most money globally, but it was so resistant for so long in implementing uh, the tech to support. But yeah, uh, I wouldn't say it's 2018, as I stated. If you look back at my older videos in 2018 when I'm covering the Football World Cup in 2018, I did state I think we have a good basis. Some small changes need to be made, but there's a good basis. It's worked really well. Um, it's the first major tournament it was used in. Worked well. Some mistakes were made, not overly horrendous. Good basis. 2019, they experiment with the women's game, the Women's World Cup, because there's less eyes on the product, which I thought was, hang on a second, you have a good basis. I need to tweak a few little bits, like the speed of decisions, um, and just tweak a few little things. Nothing major, and they've gone backwards ever since. And now the interpretation is very confused. You know, they they've they've smothered it in so many officials like this, do that. It's they're just yeah. Um, they've got it. They've definitely um, muddied the waters in the remit, and 20 they need to go back to 2018, look at 2018 World Cup, and that had a good solid foundation. They've got it wrong since then. Now it wasn't needed last night because there was no need to have it last night because the on-field officials did their job very, very well. There's a reason why that officiating team were the officials in the World Cup one. The NRL with the bunker, there's been some questionable decisions, but there have also been some very, very good decisions. But again, refereeing by common sense, we need to look at the actual rules as they currently are, regardless of the video bunker with rugby league, with players running dummy lines and interference lines, and is the defender actually interfered with? Has he caught it on the outside or inside shoulder? Does it really matter? All common sense refereeing. Is that player going to make the challenge? Is there contact deliberate, accidental? All this kind of stuff. Is it destroying goal celebrations and momentum at the very least? The thing is, VAR is not used in every single game, and it's not used multiple times in a game. When it is, it's the exception rather than the rule. Except when it is, it's the high-profile decisions when it goes wrong. When it goes right, we're all okay. It's fine. But when it goes wrong and it's used in a high-profile game, that controversial decision made, that's when people blow up about it. But for the most part, it works rather well. But then there's those controversial decisions, and then there's then there's those howlers that aren't just controversial, but is he involved in play? That's when it starts, really minding people up. Thoughts on the golf merger? Discussed it before. I think it's a wait and see with golf, and I agree. Golf, football. I think some of these sports actually were at their best in the 90s and the 2000s. And money has slowly eroded, and greed has slowly eroded great sports. That doesn't mean I won't talk about it, but I've made my point clear on the LIV Golf PGA merger. It's striking similarities with the Super League wars in Australia and the NRL, which became the NRL, and the WHA being absorbed by the NHL following a decade of chronic overspending and player contracts going out of control, and the established order eventually wins. There's a rebranding or a restructuring, but the established competition wins. The breakaway rebel competition has its moment, disappears. It was never LIV golf was not going to be sustainable because the money being thrown around was ridiculous. Are modern day boxing overrated? I think modern day boxing's in a mess. I don't like the governance side of it. I don't like the direction boxing's taking with the promotion. We've got multiple, boards of classification, governing bodies. There's not one universal world governing body. There's a lot of scandals surrounding sports. American teams fix drafts and trades, but it's hard to financially dope. Well, there's tanking, deliberately playing badly to get a top draft pick, which, if I had my way, when you look at like competitions like the FA Cup and the next round is pulled out of a hat by random draw, I think that's how draft day should be done. Honestly, rather than just giving lottery odds of a percentage of getting first, second, third overall pick or whatever, I just think put all the numbers in a bag, those teams that missed the playoffs, and pull them out. And then the teams that make the playoffs, they get the second half of the draft round. So you get rid of that tanking, basically. I wouldn't be surprised if there is actually salary cap abuses happening that are being covered up very, very well by some very, very creative accounting. But again, these leagues, they have to basically publish the salaries of players. So it would have to be under dodgy third party deals, dodgy signing bonuses in order to get around salary cap rules. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's taking place. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, Man City essentially. Well, I don't play FIFA anymore, but yes, they played Football Manager basically, and Championship Manager and FIFA. And they've got the packs and all that. Yeah, that's a bit of a joke there. Can Snooker get back to better days? I hope so. I hope these players getting lengthy bans starts, a trend of the sport cleaning up its act. It does need to clean up its act. It, it's not a good look when you've got that many players involved in an ongoing match fixing corruption scandal. I think more players are going to be found out. I think more officials are going to be found out. And snooker needs to wean itself off the gambling sponsorship. A lot of sports do. Do UK owners have a history of making taxpayers build their stadium like NFL? Yes and no. It depends on the club and it depends who owns the land. Taxpayer money has been used to build stadiums that clubs are tenants of. In saying that, Tottenham. I mean, it's a difficult one because I think it depends on the situation, but I think a lot of the money for stadium builds has come from investment and ownerships. But but you know, the old Olympic Stadium, which is now West Ham's home, they are tenants. They don't own it. That's got taxpayer money involved in the construction. Same with Wembley. So uh, uh, I think tennis has peaked. I don't think necessarily tennis has peaked. I think this upcoming generation is going to be very very competitive because we're starting to see other players win major titles. Um, but I think at the moment we've had an era of dominance by 3 or 4 or 5 players. But we'll see what happens in the coming crop because there's some very young, talented, explosive individuals who are changing how the game is played. Happy birthday, Stephanie! There you go. I have no idea who Stephanie is, but happy birthday. Like Chargers owner, he moved the team because the city council blocked the move. Yeah, look, I mean, in North America, it's different. Obviously, it's the franchise model. It's not the same as Europe and South America with the club model, where there's a stronger connection to the community. But look at Oakland. They've lost the Raiders. The Oakland A's are going to probably move to Vegas. You know, the Oakland Coliseum is falling down. Um, Look at Arizona with the Coyotes and their ongoing arena issues, which may or may not be solved because they're looking at several options in the Phoenix metropolitan area. Um, but um, look at the Saddle Dome in Calgary. Look at the Ottawa Senators' ongoing potential ownership takeover. I mean, that reminds me of the Newcastle United protracted sale over here. It, the US and well, um, the North American sporting culture is different. There's a lot more reliance on the academic NCAA system with the US colleges. I'm actually going to just move quickly because my back is starting to kill me. I love having a bad back. It's fantastic. I love having a wrecked shoulder and 2 wrecked knees. I'm 30. I'm 33, going on 83. My body is wrecked. Just saying that with love, but my body is wrecked. Hang on 1 second. That's better. Now I'm not going to be in pain. Uh, um, I think the situation in regards to that's so much more comfortable. The situation in regards to stadiums and arenas in the US and Canada involving taxpayer money to entice teams to stay or teams to relocate. Um, that's a debating point. It has caused teams to move or threaten to move. Um, and I think Calgary and Arizona right now in the NHL, for example, are got arena issues, and they're big talking points. Ottawa has an issue with ongoing sale, and whoever the potential new owners are they going to stay at the current Canadian Tire Centre? Are they going to build the Breton Flats, which was the plan under Melnick before he passed away? I mean, there's a lot to consider. There are some arena issues. We saw it with the Islanders, for example. Um, You cheated on your birthday before because what do they matter when you get older? True. I don't do anything on my birthday these days. Uh, Football season's over for now. Yes, I'm kind of glad, but there's going to be lots of transfer news. I could have done a video on McAllister going from Brighton to Liverpool, um, but there's going to be a lot of player movement. So I'm going to keep my eyes on the transfer market. Um, you see it as a tax if the local municipality or local area don't pay, they move our team. It's extortion. Um, Having said that, there's still international football. It's Nations League. I'm not watching the Nations League, Under 20 World Cup. I'll probably try and catch as much of the Women's World Cup as I can, but that all depends on if the FIFA blackout goes ahead or not with their threat to geo block things. But I'll find a way around it. At the same time, I'm sort of kind of glad that there is going to be a little bit of break from sport because then I can just focus on the sports headlines that are coming out and the transfer market to a certain extent. Um, I do think there's going to be some big player movement, and there's some other sports stories going on, like the ongoing snooker things. Who remembers who wins the Nations League? Seriously, the Nations League is it's not the way to fix international football. That's my opinion. Um, my way of doing it would have been World Cup, following summer qualifying tournament, Euros, following summer qualifying tournament, World Cup. That's how I'd have done it. I would have got rid of all these pointless Nations League. That summer window where you would have the tournament in the other year. Every even year you have a World Cup or Euros. In the odd year you have the qualifying tournament for the following tournament. So it's actually a proper tournament, mini little round robin kind of thing, where you get all the qualifying games done. Your qualifying group, there's a host nation for that qualifying group, that kind of thing. And that would probably the fans be more interested. You don't have all these international breaks that disrupt the league season. And it flows better. There's no these pointless friendlies. Um, so that would be my way of fixing the international schedule to a certain point. But UEFA and CONMEBOL have seen a way to make money because money and money and money. But I'll play welfare money. But player welfare money, fan enjoyment money. It's all about money. Do I watch club friendlies? No, I don't bother with friendlies. Pre-season friend. I've been to a couple of ice hockey pre-season games, and the atmosphere, the fans don't turn up in the same numbers. The players aren't playing at the same intensity. Um, and so, for me, nah, um, I'm not overly interested. I don't put a lot of stock in how teams play in friendlies because that's just getting match fitness up. I'm more interested in regular season play and the cup games. But I've been to a couple of ice hockey pre-season, well, quite a few pre-season friendlies. I didn't think much of them. The intensity wasn't there. See, the players weren't fully match fit. They were physically fit, but they're not up to match speed. The crowd numbers weren't great. A lot of empty seats. Atmosphere was not as good as a regular season game when the game actually matters. And yeah, I don't put a lot of stock in it. Former Cardiff City manager Steve Morrison has been appointed to Hornchurch FC. That's interesting when a manager who's managed at a higher level goes to the non-league. That's quite interesting as a career move. Silva to PSG is brilliant. Gundogan may go too. Pep will clear out City now. Wow, that's going to be interesting. I can see a lot of squad turnover at Man City. I do honestly think they're also looking at these upcoming financial fair play rules that are going to change. I think we're going to see a lot more um, intensive investment in the youth system. I think but I don't think Man City have managed to get the crop of talent that Man United had in the early 90s, 30 years ago, the class of 92, and then subsequent years that came through and kept feeding into the main senior side for a long time. Man City's youth system is not producing the talent it should be for the amount of money that's been invested into it. Hopefully that changes. But if these new spending rules are going to become a strong reality and be strongly enforced, a lot of clubs are going to have to look at their youth development. Even PSG have basically stated we've got to cut salary, we've got to put that money into the academy, actually producing local based talent and getting them into the system. Um, well, people were saying that about a lot of clubs, though they're never going to win a trophy, or a European trophy, or Champions League, Europa League, whatever. And then when it happens, you get the bug. But some teams only win it the once and never again. PSG will soon, and Mbappe needs i.e. more money. Look, PSG, much like Man City, have distorted club football, badly distorted. Real Madrid and Barcelona are spending money they don't have, which has distorted um, club football. So, in my view, to me, I have fallen out of love with the game that I was obsessed by. The sport that I lived and breathed every day as a kid and as a teenager growing up. I feel less invested in now. When I do my videos on the club histories, yet they are fun to do those videos, they really are. Don't get me wrong, I love looking at the club histories and going through the UK clubs, the European clubs. I might start looking at more South American clubs as well. I've done a few videos on South American clubs. They are fun to do because it brings back fond memories of the 90s and 2000s for me. It honestly does. The sports I'm more invested in now, which are the NRL, which are the NHL, which is motorsport, I've always felt invested in these sports. And you look at rugby league players compared to top level European football players. The top paid player in the NRL makes, I think, 1.2 million Australian dollars a year, maybe 1.5, which equivalates to about £800,000 to about 1.2 million pounds, something like that. The exchange rate. Exchange rates fluctuate, but they're on that a year. Some high-profile players like Mbappe are on that in a month. So a far more brutal sport, a far more brutal league. They're underpaid. The NHL, the average league minimum salary is 750. I think it's $750,000 a year US, which is about I think £800,000. A yearly salary is a weekly salary or a monthly salary for a top player in Europe football. So it just shows how underpaid some of these athletes actually are, what they do. So the French league and French football is in a situation of its own making because they allow PSG to take place. You still find it amusing that your parents are older than PSG. My parents are older than PSG. Do Everton in South America? That's an interesting one, but there's a couple of Juventuses in South America. You've got to remember the European influence of South American football in the early days was predominantly British and obviously Italian and Spanish influences on the growth of the game in Uruguay, Brazil, Argentina. That influence is felt today. And when I start doing some of the South American club histories, you're going to be stunned by the influence that um, British, French. Yeah, there is a Spanish. This is what's interesting is you look at um, demographics. Best way to look at it, and you do have this influence, and the growth of the game um, in South America is a European influence. They just happened to get quite good at it, especially the Argentinians and Brazilians. They got quite good at it, and Uruguay, um, and they won some World Cups. It's a thing. Um, and there's a reason why their best players come over to Europe now to play, which wasn't always the case. Can you imagine if Pele in his prime was playing in Europe, for example? Can you imagine, um, you know, Maradona as a teenager when he's 17, breaking into the Boca side, uh, going to Europe earlier? Um, but yeah, look, club football doesn't exist outside Europe. Apparently, it really does. South American club football is fantastic, high quality, very entertaining. The fans are lunatics, but the mainstream media in Europe doesn't pay attention to the club game in South America like it should. Because you look at the quality of Argentinian, Brazilian, Uruguayan, Colombian, Ecuador. You look at these South American players that are playing in top leagues and clubs in Europe, um, and it's without without a strong club system in South America. You don't get that. The problem is we're poaching their best players far too often, which I think is a bad thing. But it's seen as if you make it to Europe, you've made it as a player. Back in the day, during the height of the Cold War in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was seen as a bad thing. Very few South American players were allowed special dispensation to go over to Europe to play. So your Kempes, for example, Mario Kempes, one of Argentina's greatest ever players, um, was one of those players given that special dispensation to go over and play. It wasn't the done thing until the late 80s, early 90s, when suddenly Maradona and Kempes paved the way for your Ronaldos, your Rivaldos, Simeones, Batistutas. They start going over because of Kempes and Maradona. When that starts happening, and then the fall of the military governments and the democratization, the re-democratization of Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, and Chile, when the dictators are overthrown, suddenly there's freedom to go and ply your trade um, in Europe again. And suddenly they come over and they end up in Italy, Spain. Ozzy Ardiles and Ricky Villa obviously ended up at Tottenham in the early 80s. They were the exception rather than the rule. So there's that. If Saudi's buying golf up and boxing, if Saudi decides to start up a league, what sport would they go after? All of them. They can buy what they want. They can spend what they want. Could you see the Saudi league buying into European competition through their league? Time zone difference, climatic difference. They would have to change confederation. They would have to leave the Saudi Arabia, for example, and Qatar, the UAE, and all that would have to leave their Asian. They'd either have to set up an Arabian confederation, but there'd be political reasons because Israel play in Europe. Santos with their crowd numbers. Have you seen some of the South American stadiums? They're massive. The Bombonera in Buenos Aires, like Maracanã. Some of these stadiums are huge. Some of the attendances are ridiculous. So, yeah, you've got to remember, ironically, do you know what the national sport is of Argentina? It's polo. Polo. West Ham. The missile throw. That was an unnecessary. I mean, that was there was issues before the game in the build-up with hooligan violence between Fiorentina and West Ham thugs in the city centre of Prague. There were arrests made, and there was disorder in the stadium, which again is not a good look, especially as England are trying to get a Euros bid up and running, maybe a sole bid or a joint bid. It's not a good look considering what happened at Wembley in 2021 with the Euros final and disorder scene there. It's not a good look. Um, there's also been reports coming out of Istanbul of fans having issues leaving the stadium and getting safely back to their accommodation or safely to the airport. The game kicked off at 10 p.m. Turkey time, which was 8 p.m. UK time. The game finished around midnight. And Istanbul is a very dangerous city. And there's been a lot of reports of both Inter and Man City fans struggling to safely get home, get back to their accommodation, get to the hotel, get to train stations for a train ride or whatever. Because there's various ways you can get to Istanbul. Some people have taken 5 or 6 flights to get there. Some people have taken long distance train journeys to get there because the European rail network is actually fantastic. You can get a night train, an international train. But there are reports coming out of poor management of the event, a lack of accessibility of drinking water, disability access, fan safety leaving the stadium. Istanbul does have a high crime rate, and Turkey is a very volatile country in certain aspects. There's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of crime in certain districts of cities, and a lot of reports coming out that aren't getting reported on because last year at the Champions League final, obviously, it was all over the images of the delayed kickoff and the scenes before the match. We were not seeing the aftermath of the game, fans trying to get home. Look, Santos averaging 15,000. I mean, you've got to look at where they're currently at in the Brazilian system. All 3 Italian teams lost all 3 finals. I'm going to have to look back at the old Cup Winners' Cup, so pre 1999. If a nation had 3 clubs and 3 finals and lost them all, I don't think that's ever happened before. Why English so violent with alcohol? And it's not just us. If you look at my AS Roma video, I do mention their hooligan element being quite violent. The Italian ultras are quite nasty as well. So are the French, the Dutch, the Germans, the Poles, the Russians. We're not the only ones, but the media pick up on it because of the historical connotations of Hazel and the 80s and the images of Millwall Luton, for example, which was on primetime TV or during an FA Cup game, for example, on national TV. It is a stereotype. We are not the only nation fan base with a hooligan element. But it is what it is. The Europa Conference League, the Europa Conference League, bit of a mouthful, gets disrespected that there. It hasn't done what it was intended to do, which was help the second ranked for top leagues in Europe get some European success and aid their UEFA coefficient. Because the 2 winners so far have come from the Big Five. And I think a Norwegian team made a semi-final. I think Bodo Glimt made a semi-final, quarter-final last year, so it hasn't benefited. The UEFA coefficient buggered. They should really look at bringing back the Cup Winners' Cup and revaluing the domestic cup competitions. Too many teams qualify from some leagues for the Champions League and Europa League. Media makes it worse with the Daily. You know about the Daily Mail. Don't forget Daily Express and the Sun and the stuff. Just the British media, just the media, the mainstream media in general, because it's not just a British problem. Each country goes, our fans are terrible. They used to call it the British disease, the English disease, but in general, Europe has an issue with the football hooligan element. But it's the way it's reported in each country differs. But the mainstream media seem to pick up on a lot of the negatives. The West Ham incident, the West Ham Fiorentina. I think the Fiorentina ultras were the ones who started the disorder in the city centre of Prague. So the Italian fans don't get away scot-free here either. But there's been some distasteful incidents that have happened. This is where I think the I think North America's in for a shock in 3 years' time when the World Cup comes to the US, Canada, and Mexico. They really are in for a shock. Why do a lot of fans play down winning a trophy, supporting a club that wins? And I think I'd love to win any club. Um, it depends how long your club's been starved of success, and how competitive teams have been over that period. Um, you know, it is exceptionally hard to win. I think that's the joy of it is that achievement. Um, so it all depends on how competitive the side's been over a period of time, how close they've been to winning and getting success. Um, attendances, how loyal is the fan base. What do I think about in stadium and online racial and other abuse? Um, there's a lack of consequences now for slacking someone off because, as Mike Tyson says, you no longer have that consequence of some lunatic smashing your face in. And he's right. Um, People have got a thing called a keyboard, which is what I have in front of me. People have a thing called a smartphone now. There is, unfortunately, I think we are in a better place now than what we were 20, 30, 40 years ago in regards to um, the abuse on the field that players receive in a variety of sports. I think we're in a much better place now than what we were in the 80s, 70s, etc., or when I was a kid in the 90s. I think we're in a much better place. In saying that, uh, my cousins are mixed race. It still happens. Um, they had some abuse aimed at them. They're mixed Oriental and Caucasian. Um, my aunt's Japanese. He's my mum's brother. He's obviously white, English or British. Um, so they've but members of our family, unfortunately, this is the thing that pisses me off. There's a proportion of my family that are homophobic and racist and don't give a fuck about it. I don't talk to them anymore. My mum doesn't talk to them anymore. There's a reason for that. My sister, my brother, we don't talk to them. But it wasn't even subtle by the end with their bigotry, basically, and it was casual. Um, and I've got a lot of friends of various backgrounds. South Asian, so Indian, Pakistani, Sri Lankan. I went to school with a lot of them. I've got friends who are mixed race, Afro Caribbean, and British. I've had friends from the Balkans who are mixed, Bosniak, Croat, and Anglo Irish. I've got friends who are. One of my friends is Afro Caribbean and Asian. She's from Trinidad. Oh my god, some of the stuff that came out of relatives' mouths that I just was shameful. It embarrassed me to the point where I just stopped inviting my friends over and stopped, bringing them over for dinner, and I had to live with that for a long time. So, and when you call it out, it's tough. The problem is, bad things happen when the majority of good people do nothing, and the minority of bad people do something. But as I say, I think we're in a much better place now than what we were. I think the whole taking of the knee thing and kneeling during national anthems and kneeling before kickoff, that was called champagne socialism, as I call it. It didn't actually fix anything. It was like, we're doing something. No, you're not. You're stretching your calf and calf muscles and your quads. You're not actually solving racial or homophobic abuse. You're just there doing a stretching exercise. Um, it's not actually going out into the community, going out into the. Should the term rent boy be banned? Well, um, that's going to be aimed at Chelsea and Fulham fans and players, which again, that's a connotation of someone's, you know, sexuality. So that's basically homophobia. It's a slur. It is a homophobic slur. It always has been. Um, um, is Piers Morgan still hacking? There's the whole Daily Mirror, Daily Mail, Sun, all the tabloids, even the broadsheets have done it as well. That is an ongoing civil and criminal as well. There's lots of legal cases and lawsuits going on, be it civil or criminal, and that's a discussion for the other channel. What punishment should clubs face? I think if it's player on player or a club official on another club official, that is definitely definitely within the realms of okay. There is punishment here. Fans, however, I think lifetime bans should be dished out. I do think clubs should be fined. It's partial stadium closures, full stadium closures. Hurt the clubs financially, hurt the majority, so the majority gets pissed off with that minority that keeps bringing their club, their team down, giving them a negative reputation. But look, the whole taking the knee before games. I hate racism. I hate homophobia. I hate sexism passionately. I hate all forms of bullying, discrimination. I hate it. I always say to myself, I'm colourblind. I'm not, but when it comes to meeting people, I see the inside of a person. If you are an arsehole, I don't give a toss if you're pink, blue, purple, brown, white, whatever. I don't care if you identify as a toaster or a bisexual penguin. If you are an arsehole, I'll call you an arsehole. If you're a decent human being, I don't care what you do in your spare time. I don't care if you're gay, straight, bi, whatever. Do what you want. I don't care. But I call out bigotry when I see it. And unfortunately, over the last decade, especially over since 2015, 2016, we've definitely seen a rise linked with social media, with online abuse, which then, because there's a lack of consequences there, translates into inside arenas and stadiums abusing players. And it's one of the reasons I came off Twitter, because it was just the cesspit of humanity. But I do think tougher fines, empty stadiums, tougher punishment for offenders. Um, but you know, I don't know. But I don't like this champagne socialism. Oh, we're doing something. It's public image, it's a PR exercise. It sort of backfired on them. Rather than doing things like community engagement, education, um, working with the social services, the youth services, community services, that kind of thing, rather than engaging with the community and education programs and anti-gang violence and all the issues that surround that and inclusion. They have the Rainbow Laces campaign, one openly gay player in English football. The Kick It Out campaign, there's been question marks over the transparency of that organisation, the finances and the conduct of that organisation. The media has a massive part to play, and this is why I hate the mainstream media. Massively. It didn't solve anything. People go to sporting events to escape the daily grind of the 9 to 5, the grind of life. It's release, it's an escape. But also, sporting events do snapshot society as it is at that time. There is growing inequality, not just in this country, but in the US, in Europe, South America, Australia, wherever the country is. It's a snapshot of the society the sport's been played in. So at the moment, there is an issue over gender rights, racism, social inequality, corruption, various things, gang violence, drug use, whatever it may be. and that is being borne out in stadiums. Um, this is where I think sport could use their platform for good via community engagement, working with the authorities, working with the you know, social systems of the education, community centres, community groups, the grassroots, and doing a campaign that way rather than just wasting 30 seconds of my life doing a calf stretch and a quad stretch, which is basically taking the knee. Um, I think when players are receiving racist abuse and they and or homophobic or sexist or whatever the male female, and they bring it up, they shouldn't be punished for walking off the field and refusing to play. I think they should be applauded. I think the rules as they currently stand punish the player for going, I'm going to walk off, I'm refusing to play on. Um, so I think governing bodies need to back the players more. And it's not just in England, it's in France, it's in Spain is vile at the moment for players across Europe. The US and Canada, it's the issues in the US and Canada are, especially in the US, the social issues are similar but also different. The demographics are different. The history, obviously, race relations is different. So I can't comment on the US situation. Firearms laws, for example, let's not even get into that. But there are different social issues at play. Uh, people, a lot of Americans are badly educated about our firearm laws. I can, well, actually, technically, can I actually get a firearms license? I don't think I can because of my youth record and because of my health issues. I don't think I'll be allowed. Our background checks are so strict. If, however, I pass them, I can own one. But I'm limited in what, that kind of thing, limited in the firearm I can own, limited in the amount of ammunition I can have, and I have to constantly, every regularly liaise with the police to renew my license, and it has to be in a locked cabinet when I'm not using it. I can only use it on private land. So I can still technically apply for a firearms license. It's just very, very strict. We have a thing called background checks that's so strict. So strict. In the US, it varies from state to state, open carry, concealed carry, and then you have all these horrible mass shootings. They go, but good guys with guns. Yeah, that's the police. Oh, but the police aren't trusted. Well, the police aren't trusted anyway. It just becomes a mess. And again, that would be a social cause that I think athletes could get on and go, right, let's do some community engagement. Let's just Vegas, just before the Vegas Golden Knights played their first game, there was that mass shooting in Vegas. It brought the city and the community together, it brought the team together. But it keeps happening. But I'm going off on a tangent, I don't want to do that. I don't like going off on tangents, especially political tangents, that's for the other channel. Thanks for the other channel. Homer Simpson, if you don't have a gun, the King of England can just walk in and shove you around. That's sort of the American mindset. They are really stunned over here in Europe about, yeah, we have gun ownership. We just have very, 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 very strict gun ownership laws. Which American state is the best for sport? Well, looking at my demographics and looking at my data, very, very interesting. I did the top 10 US states. California is miles ahead of every other state viewership. However, Texas is sports mad. Michigan, Minnesota, they're sports mad. Florida is a good climate sport, but they don't sell out their stadiums, which is very, very interesting. New York, the ones that seem to be driving the channel's growth in the US. California is the main engine room of US viewership. I'm surprised with New York and Texas as states, considering the populations they have being so far down. Which one's the worst? Well, then we've got to look at the NCAA programs that various states have, and the colleges, the that's where a lot of the athletes come through the NCAA system in all the major sports. Doesn't matter what sport we're talking about. And then you got to look at the sporting demographics, and that's something that I haven't really, you know, got the data on to really. I don't know enough about the NCAA system to pass judgment on that. But I think some of the lesser populated states like Wyoming, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, those with lower populations, um, producing athletic talent. Michigan actually does quite well as a sporting state because of the NCAA system. A lot of ice hockey players have come through the NCAA, gone to Michigan universities. A lot of NFL players have come through Michigan. In fact, the pro teams in Michigan suck is another thing. But on a state with the athlete talent pool, a lot of players have gone through the NCAA into basketball, NFL, and NHL. Major League Baseball players have come from Michigan and through the midgets and AAA. And so when it comes to the major sports, Michigan has a great talent pool. And produces a lot of athletic talent that goes on to represent individualistic sports like track and field, and the team sports like American football, ice hockey, baseball, and basketball, and even the MLS players come through that system through the NCAA. Worst New York fans, worst fans on New York are nasty on their team. The New York media. It's the same with Toronto and Montreal and the Canadian sports market as well. Most Americans don't leave their state. I think 60% of US citizens don't have a passport, and most of them haven't gone into state. A lot of people do stay in their home state. That is true. A lot of Americans don't leave the US, which is why I hate saying this. They're a little bit ignorant because they're so used to living in Oklahoma or Texas or California or some states have a higher percentage of citizens who have travelled overseas, like New York, California, and Texas, predominantly because of industry and business. Florida is another one where there's a lot of interstate and international travel from residents who do have that passport, do go overseas and do experience other cultures and sports. But things like the Midwest, the Rocky Mountain states, and parts of the Deep South, there is not a lot of disposable income. They don't have the money to travel abroad, and that's where they don't fully appreciate the sport and culture that we have overseas. That's where the different sport and culture lies. But in places like Texas and California and New York and Florida, those states with big Chicago and Illinois, those big metropolitan areas, a lot of people do have that disposable income because they're paid more, they can afford to travel overseas. They're more likely to get overseas travellers come there as well. But states like Iowa, for example, and Nebraska and Oklahoma, there's not that disposable income, and there's not, for example, a lot of professional sport, let's say, where overseas athletes are going to come in. I do think hosting a football World Cup and a rugby World Cup will start changing that perception, and will, obviously open the eyes of a lot of American sports fans to the rest of the world, and a lot of locals to the foreign cultures that are elsewhere, and change a lot of perceptions, because the media in the US, very right wing media, and gives a false perception of what a social welfare system is, and calling it socialism. We're not socialist, trust me. We're far from it, by a long margin. I think if an American was to come to Europe, I think the most socialist leaning country is France, but that's a political thing. Georgia State. Georgia. The state of Georgia does have a very, very good footballing program, American footballing program, and track and field program. But that is a known fact. They produce NFL talent, NBA talent, and track and field talent like it's going out of fashion. They do have a very good NCAA program in the state of Georgia. There's a couple of, like Georgia Tech and Georgia State, and a few other universities that have a very, very good track record in developing pro athletes, basically. Philadelphia. Oh, that's a fan base. The Philadelphia fan base is yeah. Look, I don't want to get onto the way that the US media and the narrative is framed about social welfare and healthcare, um, and state-owned public transportation, partially owned public transportation, and state-owned utilities. Because a mixed economy is not socialist; it's just a social welfare net. We have a better pension system, better healthcare system, allegedly. Although the way this current government is running things over here, it's just a mess. But yeah, they mistake social welfare and a social care system for socialism. Um, it isn't. It's not. But it's the way that the media portrays them. Um, they're going to be shocked when they go to France. Then very shocked if they visit France, um, and understand French society. They'll be stunned. But I don't want to spend too long on the political side of things, the media side of things, because unless it relates to sport, it's a different thing. In America, you need a car. It's hardly again true. That wasn't always the case, but their public transportation infrastructure is a shambles in the US. I think even Americans would admit that. Unless you are a remote worker, you are stuffed. But then there are places in Europe where public transportation is limited, and in rural areas you do need your own transportation to go anywhere. And rural Wales, rural Scotland, even rural parts of England, the train station is long closed down. There isn't that motorway access. There may not be an airport for many miles. And if you don't have a car or a motorcycle, you have to walk or cycle. Um, and that is a problem. But again, when we're talking about building a new stadium, hosting major sporting events, the major thing, and this is where I think a lot of European and South American fans, especially European fans, are going to be stunned in 3 years' time, is that lack of public transportation of a decent level in some US cities. They're going to be stunned when they go over there in 3 years' time. I mean, hopefully, imagine if this channel blows up and I make loads of money off it. I might get my passport and go watch the World Cup in 3 years' time in the US. I would love that. In saying that, a lot of European fans, when they do go over to the US to watch the World Cup in 3 years' time, are going to be really stunned by the public transportation levels. They're going to be absolutely stunned. Yeah, regional. Oh God, rural Australia, same in New Zealand. You're out in the middle of nowhere. You might have a train once, twice a week in some locations. Um, you have to have the ute. Basically, you have to have a car or a 4x4 or something to get around. Um, and the rural nature of some of these countries, like the misconception is of Australia that it's all outback and it's all rugged, and majority of people do live in the major cities. But if you are one of those people who lives in regional New South Wales, regional Queensland, regional Victoria, South Australia, Western Australia, Northern Territory, you are in the arse end of nowhere, and you may be for several hundred miles or kilometres. You may not see a person for 300-400 kilometres or miles. You may see more kangaroos than people for 2 days. Um, you may see some dingoes and maybe one gas station or one little roadside hotel stopping place or a small little rural community that is there as a stopping point for travellers going between A and B. Um, well, 2026. I think some of the cities they've chosen are the right cities for international airports and with decent metros and all that. However, if you're going over there, you're going to have to base yourself in one location. You're not going to be. It's going to be a nightmare. Different time zones, three different currencies. we've got the Mexican peso, the US dollar, and the Canadian dollar. They're all pegged together, so the exchange rate doesn't fluctuate too much. But you've got to be spent. You're going to have to get your dollars, your pesos. You're going to have to remember which currency you're paying in, because that's going to you're going to get confused. Um, and it is such a vast continent, vast continent. But again, it, I think it's going to be an experience for the North American hosts and the visitors, the visiting sports fans. It's going to be an experience. It's going to be great fun. There's going to be some pitfalls and there's going to be some issues. Have no doubt on that. When Canada hosted the Women's World Cup in 2015, there were a lot of issues that came out of that. And in USA 94, I believe there were issues that came out of that as well. Kickoff times, the temperatures in the daytime, some of the heat was ridiculous. I think it was the Island game where John Aldridge blows up on the touchline and they're trying to sub him on, and it was hitting 40 or plus degrees. They didn't have water breaks back then, so that's going to be very, very interesting. I believe the majority of the games are going to be in the US. I had to look at the stadium list. I did a video on the stadium list, and that is subject to change. We will expect some changes there. Do I think soccer or football will ever be big in Australia? I think it has the potential, if properly organised and um, getting a decent TV deal, to grow, but it's got to compete against the AFL and the NRL. And Aussie rules and rugby league have been very well established for over 100+ years. Um, and the A League, which is the current professional league, the majority of players are from inner city Melbourne and inner city Sydney, from the immigrant communities in the last 40, 50 years. So it's playing catch up, but I think the women's side of the game has massively grown. They are hosting the women's tournament. I think one way to grow the game in Australia would be at some point to be a host or a co-host of a World Cup. I think that's a way that they could grow the sport. The issue is sporting infrastructure, stadiums, accommodation, outside the big cities of Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane to a certain extent, Perth and Adelaide. Yes, there are some other reasonable size cities in New South Wales and Queensland, and to a certain extent Victoria with Geelong. But when we're talking regional cities in Australia, they're the size of Reading here, or Bristol, or as a class as a big Australian regional city. So there is going to be a limited amount of accommodation, stadium size, infrastructure. They have managed to host a Rugby Union World Cup, and they have hosted multiple Rugby League World Cups, Cricket World Cup. They have hosted big events, Olympics and Commonwealth Games. On saying that, they do have some big stadiums, but again, you are limiting yourself with that stadium infrastructure and hotel space and hospital space and B&B space, basic accommodation. My favourite American movie or TV show. Oh. I like Chicago PD as a TV show, although I haven't watched the last couple of series. I have most of them on DVD, but I haven't watched recent series. I'll have to get them on DVD and catch up. Goodfellas is one of my favourite films, by a long way. Of course, that's based on real events. But in reality, I don't really watch many films anymore. Although I do have a lot of DVDs over there and down there, I haven't really. I've sort of gone off film and TV in the last few years. I don't. Mainstream TV doesn't appeal to me. Mainstream media. The only things I'm really focused on is sport, really, and a couple of YouTubers that I follow who do outward bounding, kind of metal detecting and kind of things like that. So I follow the Aquachigo on YouTube. He does his metal detecting and exploring. like cave exploring and his camping videos and all that, his outdoor activities. I love metal detecting history, so that's kind of interesting to me. Other sports YouTubers, I might, see what their content's all about, what they're saying on certain things and their views on certain things, but I try not to compare myself to them. Um, um, on something random, do you ever want a college university degree? Uh, I've considered further education in recent times, but I don't want to be saddled with the debt that comes out of my salary, and I would have to try and balance that with YouTube and my job. And unless YouTube's starting to make me a lot of money, I wouldn't want to, um, at my age as well, do it. I have considered it before, but not at the moment. Are New Zealand a greater rival to Australia than England? In what sport are we discussing? Because obviously you've got cricket, you've got rugby league, you've got rugby union. They're three sports where we sort of rival each other, where I think they're on comparable levels historically, where we can all win World Cups, we can all get to World Cup finals. Um, I think it depends on the sport. Who's more likely to win the Serie A next, Juventus, Inter, or AC Milan? I think Juventus are in trouble. I think that's a very open-ended one. I think who knows? We've had three different winners in 3 seasons, so it's going back to the 90s again when Serie A was very, very competitive. Agree with TV. I'm more of a YouTube. I've just switched off, and I think it's the quality that's on there now. It's not that they're streaming services. Some of the I haven't watched Netflix in 6 months. Um, I think it's the quality of what's been put on our screens. Is not of the level of what it was in the 90s and 2000s. I think we've really dumbed down the quality of our TV shows and film. I think we've oversaturated the market with the action films, like the superhero films and supervillain films of Marvel and DC. I think Star Wars has been done to death. Um, where would I rather live? England, Italy, or Germany? I've lived in all three countries, ironically. So that's an interesting question. Um, I don't know. Most of my life I've spent here, but I spent a couple of years of my life in Germany. I spent a fair bit of time in Italy, and it's an interesting one because normally this time of year, if the World Cup isn't on, I just tune out of sport for 2 months because cricket's no longer on free-to-air coverage, and for the most part, and MotoGP and F1's gone behind the paywall that I refuse to pay the money for because it's too much. This time of year, even when I was a kid, I would just hang out with my mates and just enjoy life. I've always been that way. So I'd always get that YouTube fatigue in the summer where I produce less content over the next couple of months. I think I'm going to make sure I don't this year. I'm going to keep doing videos and doing content and keep on top of things, growing the channel. The transfer market, I think, is going to be very, very busy, um, very, very busy this summer. I will keep doing my sports history videos. I will keep on top of the ongoing um, issues involving sport because we're going to find out where the next Rugby League World Cup is going to be hosted. We do have the Ashes, we do have Wimbledon, we do have the Tour de France, we've got various motorsports. Obviously, the transfer market is going to be very, very busy. We've got the Women's Football World Cup, which is going to be great fun to try and watch as many games as possible, depending on what happens with FIFA and the TV rights negotiations, which are tense right now. I would rather live in Italy, better weather than England and Germany than I would live in Germany. Italy's weather's not as all cracked up to be. Ironically, Italy's unemployment rate is ridiculous for younger people. Who's favourite for Wimbledon? I don't know. Obviously, Djokovic is consistently the world's best player, but yes, it's a very open field this year. It's a very, very open-ended one. I think we might have a first-time winner. Um, it's not as set in stone as it used to be. The big four, big three are all retiring now. Nadal's on his last legs. Federer's gone. Murray's not the player he was. Djokovic will probably be the favourite, although there are some other players. Just Rafa Nadal is going to retire next year. Rafa Nadal has said, "Look, next year is his final year in professional tennis. He's got an ongoing bone and ligament disorder that is going to keep getting worse. In order to play, he has to have multiple painkilling injections. So his quality of life after tennis, he's got a degenerative bone and ligament condition in his ankles, which is progressively getting worse. He will need to have multiple surgeries coming up when he retires. He's been managing the condition for a couple of years now, and it's got to the point where he's decided enough's enough. And I don't blame him. He's had a good career. So, what's more likely? Italy to miss another World Cup or Germany to fail out of the group stage? I think both are equally likely and both are equally unlikely. Germany, I think, are in reset modes, and Italy, I think, are also in reset mode. I think it's about even that they either both things happen or both things don't happen. In Rafa, yeah, but Rafa Nadal, he said next year is going to be at some point next year he will call it quits. He's obviously not playing the French Open this year. He's managing this ongoing injury that he's had for a while, and it's so many athletes have basically been spending a lot of their careers managing health issues and injuries to continue playing. Yeah, Italy have made can be an enigma. Some of the most iconic international footballing moments have come because of Italy. Um, and we've seen some iconic matches involving Italy. Some iconic matches. Um, they produce some of the world's greatest players. Goalkeepers and defenders, they are almost expert at developing and producing. They keep churning out defenders and goalkeepers. It's the style of football that you know Italians culturally play. Um, I think that's evolving now, where they're starting to score more goals and be more free flowing. Um, but it wasn't always the case. At the great Inter side of the 60s and 70s, the Grande Inter was we win 1-0 every week. Um, when will Buffon retire? Soon. I think it's going to be soon. I can't see Gigi Buffon playing on much longer. He's in his mid 40s now. I mean, he's 12 years older than me. He was 12 when I was born, so that's thinking. But Buffon is just a legend. But Italian goalkeepers are famed for their longevity. When he was Italian number one, he had a lot of competition to stay number one of a good quality, and we're talking ridiculous quality. Toldo, Morgan De Sanctis, Cudicini, um, and Buffon. There were some others as well who were just ridiculous. Messi and Ronaldo, soon, hopefully. Ronaldo, when he's 41, Messi. I look. Obviously, there's no doubt on their impact on the game. Whether it's all been positive or not is another thing. Um, I'm not a Ronaldo fan, not a Messi fan, to be brutally honest, because I don't think they're the best all-round player. I prefer more hard-working, grafting players um, who are more team players, less of an ego, and are more humble than they are. They're not as humble as you think. They've both been done for tax evasion, and Ronaldo's had other allegations concerning his conduct with the opposite sex over the years that will continue to crop up. There's non-disclosure agreements and payoffs there. So where there's smoke, there's fire. My answer. I think Messi will play a couple of seasons in the MLS, which will do good to again continue to grow the game for the upcoming World Cup in 3 years' time. I think that's a good way for him to go out. He still wants to play at a decent level. The MLS is not a bad level. I think he's decided now to finally challenge himself on a different continent. Um, in saying that, I think the quality, as I say, the quality of football we've seen is not the same level as what it was, as I say, in the 90s and early 2000s. Um, I honestly believe that I've watched that much football that I think that's the case. I think there's too much money in the sport. I've said that for a long, long time. There's a bloody fly that's pissing me off that will be dying soon when I get my hands on it. Um, Out of Chelsea, Man United, Liverpool, Bayern, and Juventus, who would win the league in a five-team league? Bayern or Liverpool, probably at the moment, with recent things recently in success. Is defending as good? No, no. I think there's too many players who are mercenary where they just go for money. I think the game has changed so much. Pace of the game, uh, the boots, the footballs, the pitches are of a different quality. Um, the rules have evolved. Things you could do as a defender 20 years ago, you can't do now because you're going to get booked or sent off. You can't get away with certain bits of sportsmanship because of VAR and the amount of camera angles. Um, and I think the game is not as good in quality as it was. The sport isn't. That's my opinion. I've watched that much football over the years. I can say that quite safely. I don't think it's of the same quality. The handball, who knows what's going on? True, very very true. Um, uh, Again, they brought in VAR and they blurred the interpretation a little bit of certain rules, and they've sort of got the implementation wrong. That fly is going to annoy me significantly. My window's open, buzz out of it. I think they definitely got the implementation wrong. As I said, 2018 they had a good solid foundation, and they didn't kick on from that. They didn't build upon a solid foundation. They made a lot of errors, and I think it will end up costing the game long term unless they actually fix. I think they basically just simplify the rule. Simple is better. When you have loads of complicated rules and you bring in and then you bring in more rules and changes and variations, it complicates. Just simplify the rule set. The game will flow better. Um, I mean, if I had my way, if let's say I'm in charge of FIFA or UEFA, there are the changes I would like to make. If I was on the rules committee, I would bring forward some ideas to simplify. Um, Unfortunately, I'm not in a form of administration, sports administration. But from a fan standpoint and from viewing what I'm viewing and seeing decisions made and the implementation, they are getting it wrong. They could have learned and liaised with other sports who have done their teething issues, who've worked out a more efficient and effective way of communicating from the video officials to the on-field officials. And when they're doing the bunker checks in the NRL, for all the flaws that the bunker has in the NRL, it's fully sounded up the whole stadium and all those at home, so they know what they're looking at. You can actually hear it on the tannoys. You can hear it. You know what the video official is looking at. So that act of foul play, is it a try? Is it not a try? Has the player gone into touch? Is it an accidental deliberate offside? Is there obstruct? Whatever it may be, you know what the official is looking at. When there's a captain's challenge, you know what the officials are looking at and what they're trying to distinguish. Cricket, you've got the third umpire. You've always had the third umpire for a very, very long time now. You've had the video replay. They've got, the tracking technology. Same with tennis. you know what the officials are looking at if they're unsure on something. You know straight away if it's a close call, that on-field umpire is going upstairs to the TV umpire, the third umpire, and going, look, we need some assistance. We're not sure if he's been run out. We're not sure if he's in the crease for a stumping. If it's a catch close to the ground, are the fingers underneath, that kind of thing. So they automatically know, right, we can't make a decision on the field, too close to call, we're going to take it upstairs just to get the right decision. It may take a little bit of time. It may be very obvious that there's, he's been run out, stumped, whatever. The last few Champions League finals haven't been great quality, in my opinion. What do I think? Man City looked fatigued. On the second point, Man City looked fatigued in the two cup finals. Yes, I agree on that. In regards to the last few Champions League finals, how far back are we going? 2018? 2017? The 2018 final, I fell asleep. No, that's something. I fell asleep. It took about 15 minutes. I dozed off. How far back are we going? I think we've seen some great ones over the years, like the 2005 final was ridiculous. We've seen, I think, a lot of again, you've got to look at the time of year they're now playing it and the disruption we've had because of the pandemic, disruption we've had with the World Cup being played at a weird time of year and the fixture congestion, the changes to the international schedule with the Nations League. I would say 2018 onwards, I think, yes, I think that there's definitely, when we talk about things like load management, that's a good one, load management is a big discussion topic that annoys certain players and fans, because players want to play every single game, obviously, they want to get paid. I think I have to agree. I think 2018 onwards, they've been subpar. Have they been the worst of all time? Modern era, possibly. I think you would have to ask older fans who remember pre 1992, or I think what was the first Champions League final I actually remember watching? I would say it'd be 95, 96, 97. I started really paying attention because I was that age where I was a bit older. I knew what was going on. When I was about 6, 7 years old, 5, 6, 7 years old, I finally appreciated what was actually going on. And I was allowed to stay up late on a Wednesday night or Tuesday night for Champions League and UEFA Cup, Cup. I was allowed those little staying up late as a special treat to watch, games. Honestly, as I've stated, I think the last 5, 10 years, the quality of football started to drop off. I think the quality peaked at around 2006, 2008. I think when Barcelona bring in that tiki-taka style of play in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and then the Spain team adopted it. It was just like watching paint dry. Yeah, they're winning games, but it was like just I rather slip my wrist slowly. It was painful. So in that regard, I think the quality has dropped off, and I think it's been borne out in the cup finals and in knockout games and in league play. I think it's a very obvious drop off in quality. As I say, I think we reached our peak in the late 2000s, the 90s to the 2000s. I think football was at its best for quality of play. And I remember watching some fantastic games as a kid and as a teenager and into my early 20s. And I think, yeah, we've sort of lost that a little bit. I wouldn't say the Premier League's turning into a one-team league. However, until the off-field issues with Man City are decided, there's going to be that issue. However, I do think we're going to see clubs forced to trim their spending because of this new financial fair play rules that are going to be brought in, or the new spending rules that UEFA are going to be bringing in from next year. And I think we're starting to see the trimming of that spending now, with players being let go for nothing. Like Jordi Alba, Busquets, Benzema, Messi. Some of these players could still go on the transfer market and command transfer fees, and they're being let go for nothing. Let that sink in. So Um, so yeah, I do think right now, the last 10, 15 years, we've seen a decline in quality in club football. International football, I think, has been fantastic, but club football, I'm a bit, more suspect on in how I feel. But I've fallen out of love with the direction sport is taking, and the, a lot of the issues surrounding the governance of the game. I think there's too much money in the game, and I think we've lost our direction, and we've allowed things to not go well. Tiki Taka better than the Scottish game of Hoof It Up and Mud the Ball. Um, the Scottish game used to be of really high quality. If you look back at historical footage from the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s, the Scottish style of play was actually very, very good. They produced a lot of quality players over a 2, 3 decade period. They had a very good production of talent for a very, very long time. Um, again, the UEFA coefficient harms that. The first World Cup I remember was USA '94. Italia '90, I was 6 months old, so I can't comment on that. But I do vaguely remember Euro '92 to a certain extent. The USA '94 was the first tournament where I really, because I think I was still at nursery. I think I was still at kindergarten. I hadn't started primary school at that point, so I was able to watch a lot of the games in the evenings, and I do fondly remember USA '94 and Euro '96 as well. And USA '94, obviously England didn't qualify, so it was just watching some of the best players in the world play. Um, Serie A Napoli into Juve, you're right, but it's hard to watch. Ask Roma. No, I remember a Serie A as a kid growing up. It was on free-to-air TV, a live game each week. You had the highlight show on the Saturday, you had the live game on the Sunday. It was religious viewing in my household for many, many, many years. Um, you know, um, and I loved it. But then the Calciopoli scandal hits, and I don't think Italian football's fully recovered from 2006. It's getting there, but it hasn't fully recovered. Um, I don't know. I don't know all and see all. There's a lot of stuff I'm surprised when I do my sports history videos and I look back at various bits and pieces. Um, and I want to learn about things. You know, when I do my club histories, I'm like, wow, that club hasn't won as much as I thought, or that club's actually got a lot of good history but hasn't won. It was yeah. I'm stunned when I do some research and stuff. Um, I wish I was only 3.5 in USA. I think I just turned 4 and a bit, so I was 4.5. But I was just at that age where you know oh no, I was born in '89, so yeah, I was 4.5. So I was at that age where obviously you're exploring and you're watching and you're absorbing everything like a sponge. And it does seem like yesterday that I was watching it. And I do remember John Aldridge and Jack Charlton blowing up on the touchline when they want to get John Aldridge on. I forget who they were replacing. They're trying to bring a player off and they want to get John Aldridge on. And it's in 40 plus degree Celsius heat. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's in the high 90s, low hundreds Fahrenheit. Bloody hot day. And obviously, over here in the UK, we're on the East Coast. We're 5 hours ahead of the East Coast, and we're 8 hours ahead of the West Coast. So they did a lot of the kickoff times for the European market. They were very, very keen, USA '94, to make sure they didn't lose that European TV market share. Very, very keen. So a lot of their games took place at really hot times of the day. So if they say like now today, I mean, yesterday it hit 31, 32 degrees Celsius, which I believe is about mid 90s Fahrenheit for those who use the Fahrenheit system. Today, slightly cooler, but we could have a thunderstorm any time from now to midnight. So after I'm on this live stream, I'm going to stick my head outside. I'm going to water my strawberries and my mint, and go from there. Uh, Um, the history of football. Oh yeah, history of football is one of my subscribers. So I subscribe to him, and he subscribes to me. So yeah, I love that kind of supporting of our fellow channels. Um, Sports watching was like a sponge growing up, absorbing all the. Um, I was as a kid. I was football mad, and then I fell in love with rugby league because of State of Origin and the Challenge Cup. And you know, and I remember the Sheffield Eagles winning the Challenge Cup as the underdog, and I remember the London Broncos getting to the Challenge Cup final and getting absolutely slaughtered. But I fell in love with um, a lot of. I fell in love with the NHL because of the Mighty Ducks films. And my dad, being in the British Army, went to Canada a lot with for NATO training exercises. And as military personnel, they were allowed to get discounted tickets for the Edmonton Oilers and the Calgary Flames. So I fell in love with ice hockey at a very young age. Um, and I just went from there. And as a kid, we actually had cable TV. And because my dad was in the armed forces, we got a massive discount on the price. We had Sky Sports, we had ESPN, we had all the international sport. My dad was sports mad, so it sort of impacted me. And one of my earliest childhood memories was going to Anfield on my birthday to watch Liverpool versus Sheffield Wednesday. And I remember Sheffield Wednesday won the game 1-0, and the current away end was only a single tier, and they were building it. And of course, that famous Sheffield Wednesday fan from Wolverhampton, big fat bloke who's topless, covered in tats, he was there. And this is when he obviously had hair. And it was snowing, middle of December, it was snowing, and he's got his shirt off for the whole match. I'm vaping. I'm vaping a Lost Mary, which is nicotine-based flavored vape. I am teetotal, so drugs are bad, bad. But this is a nicotine vape. It's a flavored vape with oh god, I'm playing a box one. I saw the Brazil flag, Brazil national team and flag at school, and I was like, what the this? Yeah, when this is the thing. So the US is learning about obviously the European Association Football. Um, I did not go to Eton. I went to Wellington College, which is one of their biggest rivals, ironically, which is just down the road from where I live. I didn't go to Eton. I have played Eton at sport and we smashed up their changing rooms because that was kind of fun to do. We don't like Eton very much. One of my best mates went to Eton. I haven't spoken to him for like 20 years. Really unfortunate because I really got on with him. And then we just drifted apart, and I haven't seen him for so long. It's really offensive. But anyway, the British connection. My father told me Wales should have qualified in US for USA '94. They had it. Look, Ryan Giggs and Ian Rush. Obviously, Ryan Giggs was young. Ian Rush was at the end of his career. They had some good players. Rob Savage was part of that class of '92 as well. Um, in school, they showed the England games. Yes, yes. Even in Wales, the Welsh team just weren't quite there. The British connection. Are you vaping pot or tobacco? Boffin MI5 convert. I wish I was James Bond. United, Chelsea, Arsenal been carried by City. And Arsenal have been in basically this rebuild for the best part of the decades. Chelsea, too many managers have gone through Chelsea, which has affected stability, and of course then the ownership issue. United, discussed the Glazer ownership to death. I think that's starting to have an impact now on the team. And they've got a lot of managers. Ten Hag, okay, he's won some silverware, and he's brought a bit of joy back. But go from there. Jimmy Glass, remember the name? I'll have to look at that. Do I like 80s punk? I mean, look, my uncle's in a punk band, so my uncle, who I'm seeing tomorrow at my nan's funeral, he's in a punk band. He has his own record label, and he also occasionally presents um, an evening slot on a local, regional, digital, alternative radio station. Am I into it? I love ska. I love reggae. I love death metal. Uh, uh, Christ, yesterday I was listening to Leonard Skinner, Freebird. Um, my mum was a big. My mum was an interesting one because my mum was a Blondie fan. I've got some vinyl. I like New World, New Order stuff. So we're talking about the New Romantics of the early '80s. So I love my Depeche Mode. Um, I love my Fleetwood Mac. But then I like things like Pantera and Slayer, Megadeth. Well, Megadeth not so much, but I'm more of a Slayer Anthrax fan out of the big four thrash. I like Sacred Reich. Um, I love Faith No More, Incubus. I listen to Pearl Jam over Nirvana. Um, oh, we're like a lime. I haven't been called a lime in a very long time. Um, I've not been called a limey in years. The last person to call me a limey was actually a Yank. I knocked him out, which was fantastic because it felt so bloody good. Um, uh, the Subhumans and Dead Kennedys. Yeah, I mean, my uncle's a big fan of the Dead Kennedys. I like the Clash. Um, I like Joy Division, New Order, which is basically Joy Division without the lead singer because he dies. Um, um, there's a lot of, but I listen to Motown. I love my Motown. I love my Motown. Um, Sunshine on a cloudy day. Oh, da 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 da. My girl, talking about my girl. Do 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 do. Um, I mean, if I was to go, I mean, I used to have a big record collection. Now I've only got a few vinyls, and I've got Soft Cell, I've got Blondie, I've got Genesis, and I've got Metal Goddess, which is a British metal band from the '80s, who were a female metal band, and they were a bit iconic. I went, "Mom, do you want this?" Which is not my cup of tea, but it's mine. Though. Ooh, okay, we're using the M word. Don't use the M word ever again. I know you may be a black man, but we don't use racial slurs. Simply because my dad's family, my dad always used to say to me, and this is why I love learning about the Gaelic Athletic Association and hurling and Gaelic football and Croke Park. I did those videos on the GAA. My dad's family originally are of Irish extraction from the south, and I've done my family history. We've got a very mixed Protestant and Catholic background, of course, the politics of the Troubles and the Irish Civil War and the Irish War of Independence, things like that. My dad used to say to me, I'm a black Irishman. Now, if you look at my skin tone, I tan really well, and I've got dark hair and dark eyes, which means I've got a bit of Arab in me. So I've had a few racial slurs thrown my way as a kid on holiday, because I basically look like a gypsy. I tan really really well, and then if I'm out in the sun every day, which I am with work, I've had this tan on my arms is from the winter. I tan really well, so when I'm out in the sun with my job, um, um, yeah, I look like I'm from. I look like I come from the Balkans, like Albania or Turkey or something, or somewhere like or Bosnia. And yeah, Black as Bog. Watch the Sharp series with the Colonel in that episode where he goes to find where all his recruits have gone. Black as Bog. Black Irishman. It's basically to do with the colour of our hair, the pigmentation of our skin when we have very olive skin, and it's to do with the North African. This is going back to the times of the Romans and the Greeks, the Phoenician, Carthaginian traders trading with the Celts up in France and Ireland, and what was basically what is now Britain, but the trade routes through the Bay of Biscay and the Basque region, and that's where Black Irish come from. The Irish had tin and copper, so the Cornish, and the Mediterranean peoples had olives, wine, and they traded. So you will find Celtic stuff in Carthage, which has been radiocarbons to coming from Southern Ireland and Cornwall and Brittany long before the Roman Empire. Weird. Um, yeah. What's my favourite American movie? Goodfellas. Uh, um, what? Yeah, no, in southeast England, bog also means toilet. Bog means boggy place, which is peat bog, which is what the Irish used to heat their homes with during the Irish potato famine, um, and roof their houses with. Um, Peat is a very good fuel source. That's where the word bog comes from. Um, um, Salute. Goodfellas is well. Goodfellas is. I've got to do a film review on Goodfellas. It's my favourite film. Once Upon a Time in America is one. It's so long, but also actually based on true events as well. Um, the American Jewish mafia. Have you seen any black and white gangster movie? Yes, love. I love my noir films. I had to study them when I was a student doing media studies. I love my proper old school gangster film. Um, Rate my interest in sport out of 10. You can just search sports if you want. Well, I have done my top favourite sports video back in 2018. I'm going to have to do a new one where I rank my sports. But at the moment, in my top 10, well, my top five, rugby league and ice hockey, I think would be about equal. I love my motorsports. I love my superbikes, my rallying, touring cars, my NASCAR. That comes in behind. International Rugby Union comes in next, and then international football. Um, that's basically where things are at right now. I thought in the south it was just a toilet. No, we call it a bog as well, or a kazi. Well, I'm from an army background, so I sometimes call it a kazi. Um, um, Goodfellas pizza is great. Yeah, um, yeah, not like a true Neapolitan. I mean, if you to have proper pizza, go to Naples or Napoli, have a Neapolitan calzone, which is basically a pizza folded in half, which is like a kebab wrap, like it looks like a nacho kind of thing, taco. So pizza originally was calzone. Calzone is basically the Neapolitan form of a pasty. And what they do is they get a small little pizza, and they fold it in half, and it looks like a taco wrap. Fantastic. And there's a train station near me that does fantastic calzone. Which sometimes I get the train home from work, depending where my garbage route bin route ends. I get out and on the train station platform they've got this little cafe, and it does a great calzone. Um, yeah, good fellas, made with respect and in the Republic of Ireland. Ireland is a great place. You'll go for Big Bang. Maltese Falcon, Scarface. Watch The French Connection 1 and 2. They're brilliant crime films. You've got the Godfather trilogy. The first two are good. The third one is diabolical. You've got Casino, Raging Bull, obviously Goodfellas. You've got Black Mass. Um, Little Caesars and Domino's. Yes. Papa John's, another one. Um, Sicilian pizza. Sicilian pizza is not the same as Neapolitan pizza. Pizza I mean, I have spent a lot. I've been to some of the best Italian restaurants because they're in Italy and they call them a cat. Um, well, to call it spag bolognese, ragu della bolognese means it's the sauce of Bologna. So when you go to Turin and you have the local pasta dish, it's a Piemontese sauce of Piedmont. Milanese is Milan-based sauce. So yeah. Um, but my dad's version of spag bowl is a bit more beefy and a bit more meaty than a traditional Bolognian spag bowl. Spaghetti is the pasta. Bolognese is the sauce. So calzone is a pizza wrap. Um, you have a Roma pizza, which has got thinly diced ham on it, and a special type of ham on it. That is a Roma pizza, my favourite pizza. You've got the Neapolitan pizza. It's fun. Oh, stop making me hungry. Um, you have. I spent a lot of time in Tuscany, so Florence, Pisa, Lucca, La Spezia, uh, Florence. I've been to Umbria a lot, where Perugia is, and that's near Lake Trasimene, where Lake Trasimeno, Lago di Trasimeno, where Hannibal from Carthage defeated the Roman legions and drowned them in the lake. He literally just caught them on the river pass and drove them into the lake. I've been to Salerno, where obviously the Anglo-American armies landed in South Naples in 1943 in the war. I've been to Paestum, which is one of the old Greco-Roman ruins where the German troops and the Italian loyalists stuck behind and turned it into a fortress and all the pockmarks. Fantastic. I have been to Palermo. I've seen the courthouse where Falcone did the Maxi trial. I've been over the motorway bridge where Falcone was blown up during the Maxi trial. I've done a video on the Maxi trial on the other channel. Now calzone is Italian. Stromboli is crap. I've had it. It's horrible. Double Indemnity, Angels with Dirty Faces, Little Caesar, Roaring Twenties, four great, four Elephants. Yeah, I've actually where some of my family live is one of the passes allegedly where Hannibal came over the Alps and they found Carthaginian art and Celtic artifacts from that era and Roman Republican artifacts from that era in that part of the Alpine watershed. So yeah, I have been to Lugano. I've been all over the Italian bit of Switzerland. I've been over the German bit of Switzerland. I've been to Zurich. I've been to Basel. I've been to Geneva. I've been to Lausanne. I've been to St. Moritz. I've been to Davos. I've been to Klosters. I've been to Kerr. I've been to Graubünden, which is where they speak Romansh, which is a weird language. It's just weird. It's like drunk Germanic Italian. It's hilarious. I have. I've been on the big red Bernina Express, the red trains, the Glacier Express. I've been on that. That's fun when you're going over the Bernina. I've actually walked on the Bernina Glacier. It's hilarious. You can see it from my aunt's house. I've been to Milan. I've been to Turin. I've been to Triestina, which is right by the former Yugoslavia, which is right by the Slovenian border. I've been to Naples, Rome, Florence, Perugia, Ancona. I've been all over. All the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, the black nobility, and the wars between the Holy Roman Empire and the Pope. I've been to some of the. I've stayed. Play Assassin's Creed 2. The little castle near Siena. I've stayed in that castle. It's to scale. It's fantastic. I've been to all the churches and all the piazzas in Assassin's Creed 2. I've been to every single location. It's fantastic. My thoughts on the Guelphs and the Ghibellines. I love Renaissance Italy. Stop. I love medieval Italy. Stop it. Stop it for the other channel. Stop it. Stop that. Getting silly. A bit suspect too, I think. Best part of Switzerland, Graubünden, which is the far eastern canton, which is the biggest canton with the least population density, and it's where the Swiss National Park is, which they have European brown bears. Am I Catholic? No, I'm not. I don't believe in God. I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form. I'm not religious in any shape or form. My stepdad is a practicing Protestant. My half brother has been baptized and christened, but I'm not a practicing. I don't practice any religion or any faith. But I'm interested in the history. So, and that's an interesting history with Boavista. The two brothers who set up the club, who were the textile company owners. Their workers were Catholic, they were Protestant, Anglican in particular, a form of a denomination of Anglicanism. They wanted to play on Saturdays because they saw the Sunday as the day of rest. Their Catholic workers worked a 6-day week, and their only day off was a Sunday after church, and that's how Boavista sorted out playing their home games on a Sunday. Oh God! Here comes the thunderstorm. Oh my God! Is that hail? I think it might be hailing outside. I think we might be having a thunderstorm in a minute. just sticking my nose out the window. The sun's out, but rain's coming out the sky. So we have the possibility now of thunderstorms now from now until midnight here in the UK. I've not been all over the world. I've been all over Europe. Um, Courtois, Hazard, Batshuayi, Vertonghen. Are they a bust? I think they had their opportunity in the 2010s and they blew it. The 2018 World Cup was their opportunity. What is sports Boffin's chosen faithfully? George. I guess George Michael is pretty good. My mum has that on vinyl. One of her favourite albums was his "Gotta Have to Do." Ooh, I want that. Ooh, gimme, come on. The second track on that album, "Sex," is in Beverly Hills Cop 2. Um, I'm inside my flat. There's only a little bit of just moisture. The thunderstorm hasn't hit. We've got time. I'll check my weather quickly. I like the way we've gone off topic and now we're discussing like the Italian Renaissance. And seriously, Assassin's Creed 2, the little castle near Siena in Assassin's Creed 2. I've been and stayed in that castle. There's a massive. The guy who built the castle was an English mercenary who became a condottiere. Condottiere, which basically means mercenary captain, and he was granted land by I think it was the Republic of Siena or maybe the Republic of Florence, and he was allowed to build his castle, and his suit of armor is still in the castle. And I tried to get into it, and I was told, no, stop playing with the sword and the musket. Um, I've played Black Flag, Unity, Syndicate, Odyssey. I've played Odyssey's my favourite, but Assassin's Creed 2, the cultural significance of that game, because I've been to all the locations. I've been to all the piazzas, townhouses, museums, which are now the churches, the the town squares. Odyssey was fun though. George Michael, he was at one point he was the highest motorist in the world because he jumped out of a moving Range Rover at 70 miles an hour on the M4 near Maidenhead because he was stoned and he crashed his car into a lamppost a few times. Um, um, Honestly, it was a good game. Good game. I think I still have it in my Xbox collection. I haven't played it in a very, very long time. I enjoyed it, but I got one of the side quests wrong, which meant it was harder for me to complete. I had to defeat the Medusa, and I did it slightly wrong with how I gained um, the Artemis bow, so I screwed up. I think Black Flag will always be my favourite because it was the first AC game I played. For me, Assassin's Creed 2 and Odyssey are my two favourites. The Odyssey one because I love my classical history and I studied the Peloponnesian War and the Greco-Persian Wars and I love that period in time. And I want to go to some of the locations. And Assassin's Creed 2 because it's Italian Renaissance. It's the De Medici family, the Sforza family, just the intrigue behind it. Um, at the moment, nothing. Nothing at the moment. My Xbox hasn't been played for a while. If you look over there, you'll see my TV. My Xbox is in a box down there, and I haven't played for nearly 3 years. There's nothing. There's nothing out right now that I want to play. I can't afford the new Xbox and new PlayStation. I can't justify the spend. That's something I've always stated. Far too expensive. I do not have the disposable income that I used to. I don't have the savings that I used to. So while I do enjoy, I've still got my original place. My next door neighbour gave me a second-hand portable TV, old school analog with a DVD player. It's about 20 years old. All I've got to do is get a universal remote, and I can plug my original PlayStation and PS2 in, so I can have some fun with some of my older games. I still have Crash Bandicoot, for Christ's sake. I still have the original Gran Turismo, so I go back to the 90s with my gaming. Um, but esports is something that I think we could get onto on this tangent because esports is now worth billions of dollars. And professional sports have linked up with esports, especially during COVID, with the NASCAR drivers were doing esports, the Premier League footballers were playing esports, the NHL, these esports. Esports, I think we should do some content on and discuss the rise of esports and how much it's worth and the sponsorships and professional sport linking up with esports. So that, I think, entices younger fans This is where Major League Baseball is going wrong. It's not engaging with a younger fan base. And as I say, obviously, we've got the Major League Baseball London series returning, what, 2 weeks' time? I've seen one advert for it. One advert. Like, that is they confirmed they were returning this year, 6 months ago. I've seen one promotional advert for it. Yeah. EA Games, which is the parent company of EA Sports, has been beset by issues for a long, long time with product quality, the online servers, and then they got into that contractual dispute with FIFA that ultimately led to FIFA saying you can't use the FIFA name. They can still use the club likenesses and the player likenesses and the sponsorship and all that, but they can't have FIFA in it. So EA Sports have shot themselves in the foot because they could have released a World Cup game and all that kind of stuff. But they made a lot of money. It's like 2K made a lot of money out of the NBA. Pro Evo Soccer on Konami, I think it is. Some of these video game companies have really tapped into sports leagues and professional sport. One of my favourite games of all time was made by a British company called Rage Interactive, UEFA Striker. And it was the last year of the Cup Winners' Cup. And well, it's not as good as FIFA's, never will be for initial gameplay. I loved it. I still play the game now. I've had the game for 24 years. I've been playing it religiously for 24 years. And yeah, because EA Sports had that license agreement with FIFA and UEFA. Yes, you had the UEFA agreements with UEFA Striker. However, they didn't get the domestic FA agreement. So you've got Manchester Reds, Glasgow Greens, Glasgow Blues, Sporting Lisbon Greens, which is obviously Sporting Lisbon. And so you have, so Grasshopper Zurich is just Zurich. Instead of Rapid Vienna, it's Vienna. But I do think with the video game market, when they like Madden, NHL, you've had rugby unions, had various EA titles as well. You've had the golf, Tiger Woods golf. You've had Brian Lara cricket. You've had all these various sports stars put their face to a game, or sports leagues, or professional sports. Oh God, that is raining again, isn't it? I don't have to walk my strawberries now. The weather's doing it for me. I'm going to check the weather. Let me just check the weather quickly, because while we were meant to have the potential of rain, we're more likely to get thunderstorms. And if a thunderstorm hits, I'm going to have to power this all down just to protect the laptop, my internet, my light. Yes, I've got a better surge protector down here, but I don't want to run the risk of overloading the system. If there's a lightning strike nearby, we could have power cuts. So I want to bear that in mind. Apparently, the thunderstorm is actually going to be overhead very soon, so I might have to speed up this stream a little bit. As soon as I hear that first rumble, unfortunately, I'm going to have to power everything down just to protect my equipment and make sure we don't have a power surge or something that could, melt the what bloody hell that actually is like. I don't know if you can hear that, but you can see it's got darker. I've got my side light on, but the sunlight's gone, and there's a rumble in the distance. So I reckon the thunderstorms. Yeah, I can hear rumbles in the distance very faintly, and I'm in between two massive thunderstorms, so I might have to power this down. I do appreciate the fact we've discussed some non-sport stuff, because I did say it was a general hangout as well. I try and keep it on a tangent when we do go off and talk about films. We haven't discussed sports films. Slapshot's one of my favourites. The Longest Yard, the original and the remake, and Mean Machine. They're kind of cool. Happy Gilmore's another good one. There's a few others. Like Any Given Sunday. Is it Any Given Sunday with Al Pacino, where he plays the American football coach? And he gives his war speech, which is so stereotypically overacted, but actually, I've seen coaches do that. I think if it was on PS1 compared to PS2, they use. I think it would depend if it was on PS1 version or PS2, but I had it as well, and did have the Italian licenses for the Serie A and Serie B teams. Right, I am actually between two thunderstorms, so I might have to power this down. But I still have FIFA 2004. Still have it. There was a lightning strike less than 3 miles away. My app's saying that lightning is hit quite close, so I'm afraid, as there is now lightning strike within 3 miles or 6 kilometers of my flat, I'm going to have to call it. I do appreciate all the questions, really appreciate it, but for the safety of my equipment, whenever there's a thunderstorm on now, I'm a bit more cautious. Going to have to call it. However, thank you very much for the questions. Really appreciate the last 3.5 hours. Good fun. A lot of good questions. Seen some new people in the comment section, which is fantastic. But for now, for me, it is goodbye. I might try and catch some of the thunderstorm on my phone. Good old trusty, because the camera on this is better than my webcam, and I can catch some good footage. I'd try and do that. But for me, for now, it is goodbye. I appreciate it, and I will have some more content for you guys soon. It's goodbye for now. There's a thunderstorm nearby.